They just went to.
I think we can probably move that ahead a little bit here.
Okay, computer's
So let's
on.
call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Nice sunny morning. Hate to tear you away from that. Nice to see you guys again. It's been a little while. Yeah. So the approval of the agenda, does anybody have anything they want to add on there? We can have a general discussion if there's anything that comes up as we go along here. I have a few things, I'll just throw them at the end there. I don't think we have to make it official. So somebody approve the agenda, please? Thank you, Kathy. Second? Come on now, don't be shy, all in favor? Thank you. And the adoption of the minutes. Anybody have anything in there that they have a problem with? If not, move to adopt, please. Raj, Jackie, all in favor, thank you. Awesome.
Just a protocol question
Oh,
here.
sorry, go ahead. Yes.
We weren't at the last meeting, but the minutes
Right.
are part of the package. Can we keep those or the?
Yeah, that was an open meeting, wasn't it? It wasn't closed, or was it?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. We need the same information.
That's what I want to find out. Yeah. Between the lines.
Yeah. Public comments, ooh, not so much today. Action items on page, they're here somewhere.
Page
somewhere.
9.
Nine. There it is. Okay, so briefing paper to get Raj on board. I'm sure that was all done. He's looking a little quizzical down there, so.
He's got it all figured out, no problem.
Yeah. Check that one off?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we had the summary project report.
Yeah.
That's all
Functional
you get.
financial piece of the communication strategy, cost compared, particularly regarding the inclusion of municipal offices. Is, that's sort of an ongoing thing?
So we've got the square footage
Yeah.
parceled out
Yeah.
for the municipal offices, and I think we're just waiting on a cost
Yeah, and
comparison.
there's a little discussion on that a little bit later anyway.
Yeah.
Include the skate park as a possible venue in community center communications people, are in tune with that?
That was part of,
Sophie, not a good look.
that was part of a recommendation from the Recreation Commission.
Yes.
To this,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I think, is it in here? Maybe not. But regarding the expansion along around Lot 2 and the community lines.
Yeah, I've got that down just for a quick
Yeah.
discussion, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in due time. Address the availability of the Bix Gym, and that could also be part of that discussion, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
As an overall expansion and availability.
Yeah, and I've got an
facilities.
FAQ almost ready to go for that.
Okay. Set up a meeting, I guess we could, and just on that last one on point 4, just review the discussion we had with SD 45, is that part of it? School District 45, about that stuff. Set up a meeting with BDO to hire someone to do a business plan. Anything get progress there, Raj, anything at all?
I haven't had a chance.
Okay, fine.
I believe that Allison was talking to somebody at BDO, but she did tell me, I don't remember.
You know what, I'm just gonna leave that open. When she pops in the door, I'll just.
I think
hand her
they
the-
suggested somebody to do it.
Oh,
but-
good.
Well, don't
Okay,
trust
we're
me.
getting there. I'm just gonna take that out when Allison gets here, we'll just have a quick discussion through that. Extended offer to Heather Pretty for some money to write a case for support, and Maureen's not here.
Maureen had done that though, and I believe Heather's ready to go the middle of March.
Oh, she's keen.
Yeah, she's
Excellent.
keen, she's gonna do it,
Perfect.
and she's back the middle of March, so we're hoping to have that. Jacqueline and I have met to pull together a table of contents, and we're pulling together all the materials. Craig is getting us a new floor plan for the case for support, so we'll just be able to give all of that to her by Monday, I think,
Awesome.
is the hope. And then that should hopefully be done by the end of March or first of April.
Great, fantastic, good work. Number 7, send edits and feedback regarding the BIM BIAC, draft project agreement to Shauna and Jackie. You've got those, obviously, because we got them.
We received,
I'm not sure that we received any
Any.
feedback, but we did
Oh,
review
feedback.
the,
but we didn't.
oh, sorry, number 8, I'm jumping ahead. We did review with Raj, and those documents are in this package.
They are.
to
Okay.
dis- for discussion.
Well done, I think we just have one outstanding item plus one of Allison's, which I think will be covered. Great work,
Impressive.
yeah. All right, I think that's just about moving into the design team updates. I think I'll just pass it over to the design team, Sam, if that works for you. Perfect, it's all yours, Craig.
Sounds good.
Great, looking forward to this.
So I guess, first of all, we thought it would be a good idea for us to have an update meeting. This isn't as much a presentation of design as it is a chance to just check in to let you know where we're at and what sort of questions are on the page for us that we need some help with, and to look ahead to the completion of design development, what that needs to look like, what the approval process is in order to have the steering committee review design development and then go to council for approval, gate approval for gate 3.
We should say that we did have a meeting with the design subcommittee, so Jackie and Shauna and Sam and our team had a meeting. It was
2.5
a month ago.
How long ago was that?
2.5 weeks.
2.5 months ago? Okay.
Perfect.
And yeah, by way of update, we have been sort of heads down in design development, meeting with consultants, structural, mechanical, electrical, landscape, and gradually trying to coordinate the design of the building. And so what I thought we would do first of all is just outline what we expect to have in the design development report. If you remember the schematic design report, we had a lot of the similar kind of ingredients, but this report will have much more detail. And so,
Technical detail,
yeah,
less contextual detail.
yes, much more technical detail about systems and finishes and that sort of thing. So just to walk you through, this is the sort of draft table of contents for the report. We'll still have an overview of the general project description for anybody who, you don't want to have the schematic design report, read that, and then go to this other report. So there'll be some introduction, that kind of thing. There will be an element that describes the site design, and so there'll be a report from landscape with a drawing and some description of the scope of work. And there will be an updated civil report, which is a site plan showing all the site services connections in more detail, both for the off-site design, which is everything outside the property line, and the on-site design, so that's parking, curbs, gutters, services, that kind of thing. As we go through today, we have some questions that will help us plan to complete this report. And the first one, just going through this table of contents, is we would typically have some kind of arborist report defining a scope of work for tree clearing, what's going to be protected, what's going to be removed, that sort of thing. That is a question of whether we are going to go ahead and do that now, if we want to save that for later. That's one question.
Yes.
Also, in our discussions around design, particularly the site, I think everybody recognizes that that's a busy part of town, particularly in the morning with kids being dropped off at school. There's a ferry marshalling area, there's a crosswalk there already, and we're introducing a community center that's going to have maybe some traffic in and out as well. And so we wanted to ask the question, is there a transportation management
This
component?
is part of our team discussion too, when we're talking about the communications of the project associated with the frequently asked questions, getting ready for referendum. There's going to be a lot of questions about traffic and parking, and we know that we talked about that at our previous meeting. I guess the question here for the steering committee is, do we want to formalize that with a report, or are we going to rely on historical information and just a question and answer of what the municipality already knows about the site and any parking issues with that area that would be addressed in this DD report in that way, or do we want to back it up with the due diligence of a traffic consultant?
I mean, ultimately, what we would like to do is provide some direction to the civil consultant. If there's anything to do either on the property or just off the property that deals with traffic management, about, you know, islands or one-ways or any kind of traffic control, that's something that we as a team don't make decisions about. And I'm not sure that civil has any really clear direction. And so that's where, if we're going to get it into the design development report, it's worth taking a specific look at it.
Kathy?
I think it's important for us to have a traffic management plan. I mean, it's next door to a school. We don't have the expertise in-house to undertake that. And we would ask that of anybody else doing the development.
And the public keeps asking.
Yep.
Okay, so we can begin the process of procuring someone to bring them onto the team. The next question, when the answer is yes, is what are the boundaries of that? Because when we were talking about the Q&A process, the boundaries could go so far as all the way down to the ferry terminal and other places for lot adjacencies of available space. And if you're trying to do a more holistic area traffic study to answer the question of, well, where is the other available parking? How far are those boundaries reaching in the context of this study?
And I don't really want to get into the whole parking question necessarily right now, because that's a tougher one to solve, but it's related, because you're right, like, if we're going to look at traffic flow in and around the driveway,
Yeah.
just to the community center.
Those are very strict boundaries for scope definition, saying we want a traffic study of access from Bowen Island Trunk Road and parking, but are we bringing it more broadly to parking in the area?
Melanie?
There's a question for you, Gary, then. How would this then play with the discussions that might be happening with planning for Lot 2?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, that's pretty open-ended right now, and I mean, I don't see that happening in a timely fashion. Like, I don't think we're gonna have an answer.
Not before the end of design development.
No, certainly not, no.
Well, we wanted
There was
just,
Go ahead. Because there was a joint meeting with the
Yes,
advisory planning, and I
Yeah.
thought that from reviewing that meeting, that there was possible opening, there was going to be a community discussion on that one. There might be-
well, there will be, but I think
Whether
that,
a traffic.
June 9th and 10th.
Yeah.
yeah,
And what's the development, I'm just, if we
I mean, ultimately-
design, if we get a traffic management plan to deal with the current scope, that could change.
I think
Everything will
there's
change.
there's two
Plans
pieces.
of the,
There's the building and the
Yeah.
site in the context of access, driving in and out of the site like a driveway. And then there's the parking question, which is broader and has bigger implications for maybe public consultation or whatnot. So I
Yeah,
think the
and
first
I-
piece we want to solve is traffic on the site, parking on the site,
The flow.
and flow. And the answer to the public in general is the site has the requisite parking required by code for the building, but then the question's gonna be, yeah, but it's not enough. So we need to answer someone, either this project or the municipality needs to answer the bigger question, or have an answer to the bigger question at the time of the referendum.
So part of our desire is to try to limit the scope in order to keep our project moving ahead and saying, yes, we've done the work, yes, it will work given the current conditions and all that sort of thing. The larger question of planning for municipal lands and future development and expansion of the community center and that sort of thing, as much as we'd love to dive into it, I think it will compromise the project.
so then I would, to Councillor I would then suggest that we take this study that comes out of this project to inform the larger discussion.
Exactly. It's like, we came first. Whatever comes later is a change for sure, and that will need to be planned for. But as long as we develop a solution for the community center that makes sense, then that is an existing condition when the next planning phase happens.
I agree 100%. I was just kind of looking for a map here of what we're doing. I don't think there's going to be, like I said, I think we're going to be at least 6 or 8 months out on any decisions that are made on Lot 2, because we're going right back to square one in my thinking, and sort of re-looking at the zoning on Lot 2. It's going to be further down the road. I think we should concentrate on the access, because that's a big thing, the access to the community center. And in my heart, I don't want to see that as a through road into Lot 2, because it'll be a super highway, and there's a million reasons why it shouldn't be. So I think we should have it as just a terminating road into the community center.
Which is a great description of what we would like somebody who knows what they're doing to take a look and say, oh, you have 34, 33 stalls, you need fire truck access in and out.
Yep.
You're coming out onto Bowen Trunk Road, which is two-way, and it's got the marshalling, and to have them say, well, that intersection then needs to look like this.
Yes, and that's
all we want.
I agree with you 100%. I don't know how people feel around the table.
And then if
but
you
I
want to
think-
get into the parking,
We
where
don't
you
wanna
are
have-
extending it, then that's.
Can I,
Oh, good.
Yeah.
just devil's advocate, do we not also want that consultant to look at this side of the site, just in terms of planning?
I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that.
Could we,
I'm sorry, I don't want to open these cans of worms. In a more general
that's a
sense,
can of worms.
in a more general sense, that consultant could provide some commentary on a facility of this type and the amount of parking that's being provided in that context. Without making any specific comments about where that should go or what should happen, I think we could ask for that.
Or do we leave that out of the scope all entirely, and if the municipality wants to go that route, once the study's done, because it's aligning with other works ongoing, then they can just leverage the consultant already on board to do that additional piece of scope?
I'd like to see recommendations coming out.
Yeah.
Well, and what it may end up being is to understand what the design of that intersection looks like with the current layout within the current site, and if there is any change that would be needed in order to add 57 more stalls beyond. I'm not sure if it would actually change the design of it. Well, you want to have them take a look at the road? I would say no, don't include that in their scope.
So I think we should just be clear in saying that,
Yeah.
No,
not included in the scope.
No,
So
they
that
don't.
if those
Yeah.
conversations start happening when this
It's
consultant's
access
on
to
board,
the
we can
community center,
drop it down.
access and egress only to the community center.
Right,
Yeah.
not
And I think that
From
that
Bowen
nice
Island
little
Trunk Road.
presentation with 57
Oh, no.
parking stalls beyond there is absolutely, we just thought it's a shock. That would be a shock to the community. It'll never happen,
Right.
which will make, community centers going to happen. Now, just as a bit of background, our discussion with SD 45, the school district, and the use of their parking lot for event use, and they're totally open to it. But there just has to be some kind of liaison to make sure that we're not, and that comes into a timing thing with Shauna and stuff, and BIAC, that we don't plan big events at the same time, so that's a schedule.
They talk about us working
Yeah.
together so that they didn't have a big event the same night we were having a big event.
And
So-
I can imagine
and
it's
some
kind of,
low-level lighting to get from one parking lot to the other.
Correct, yeah.
And that was really, so there wasn't any problem with us using it after hours.
I think that is great and sort of the natural response
Yeah,
that you would expect. The other thing is, there may need to be some overflow, but just not the fully constructed 57 stalls. Maybe there's a little
Absolutely.
bit,
yeah.
and maybe that's part of a plan where we take a bigger picture and say to the community, you'll be able to have this many parking stalls, these are the different places where they're available, they're all walkable within
Yeah.
5 minutes, like,
Yeah,
you gotta
consequently,
give some
the
solution.
school district can use this parking lot for events over at the gym.
Exactly.
Because again, it's only a 5-minute walk. I think we should just concentrate on this area, the egress and exit out of here,
Yeah,
and determine, I don't know,
Because that intersection also, there's a crosswalk that's heavily used.
Yeah.
So that needs to be part of the planning, whether that stays in the same place or whether.
Walking trail not shown currently on that.
Well, that's
So when we're talking
trail
about
up the side of the
multimodal, we
road.
should probably engage a multimodal aspect of this.
Definitely, and.
And there will be a paved bike path
That's what I'm
on
talking
the
about,
road.
the paved bike path.
But that walking, the walking trail is already there.
And if he
Isn't
wants
what's
to come
gonna
and get a
be-
real feel, then the best time to come would probably be
8:30 Wednesday morning.
between
Okay.
8:15 and 8:45
Mhm.
on a weekday.
So, yeah, typically, traffic consultant will need to do a little bit of, sort of calculated demand and then measured demand and, yeah, of different modes, and they'll put together some suggestions about where the conflicts are, what time of day and that kind of thing.
So are you happy to give him the parameters, or?
I think so.
We'll work together.
Should we do that together?
We'll do that
Yeah,
together
awesome.
and get something going.
Kathy, can you read, where did Bob have that little speed sign thing? With the camera?
You mean where is it
Yeah.
currently?
No, didn't we have something sort of on the road?
Yeah, it was a
Measuring?
mobile camera, so he
Yeah.
had been moving it around, but it was in that area.
We've got a camera that measures people's speed and the number of cars and stuff, and we had it up for a couple of months.
Yeah.
So there's data
Yeah, that we could give the traffic.
that's.
Absolutely.
Oh,
good.
interesting,
Melanie-
that's super helpful.
Yeah, Melanie, you had your hand up, I'm sorry.
It's just as a point of information, just maybe to, for the consultants, just to know that in the fall, we've received some grant funding to do the school, an active transportation plan around the school. So recommendations, perhaps that this study could feed into that, to just let you know.
Do you know the outcome or consultant you've engaged? Is there a deadline for that work or?
I think it's to take place in the fall.
Take
Take place in the fall.
So that could work coincidentally
Yeah,
with it, that'd be awesome.
I
yeah.
think we would,
so that would be
like
good.
Craig said, we'll get started first.
Yeah,
And then this can feed into it and
yeah. Well, that's what, or
help answer the
perhaps,
bigger Q and
perhaps
A.
this could feed into their study. That's why, so those recommendations.
Yeah,
But just to know that there is that coming up online. Maybe
It
that could
is.
help with some of the access in the school to the, and also they'd probably also be looking at some strategies of encouraging, walk to 5, which is, encouraging parents to drop off further away from the school, so there'll be strategies like that coming,
Yeah.
it's just an FYI.
Sounds good. They'll need all that information when they're doing their study.
And then
So it's happening.
they'll probably need the recreation programming information as well, because that will play into, there will be play care and fitness and all of that starting at 8:45 and 9 o'clock, and everybody coming to work at the municipal hall, so there will be a lot of activity during that morning access, for sure.
I think this is a good idea as well, because it gives some real design information and study credit to the community center. And by going first, it basically establishes its presence and its needs, and then any further study around the community lands and what they need will need to take this work into account, and then it'll actually be measured and documented. So it's an easy thing to hand over to somebody after the fact to say, well, you need to at least meet all the requirements that we're addressing with this project. It gives a whole bunch of really useful information for somebody to do it for other parts of the community.
So 2 actions that I see, just to be clear. We'll work together to issue a procurement process to get some competitive pricing back for that, engaging that consultant on board. And then the second piece is an update, because I think there's a lot of good discussion here that the community needs to know about. Like you said, there's a study in the fall and there's changes to Lot 2. So the second action in that should be sort of an update to that frequently asked questions about the other work that's ongoing that Bowen Island's already engaged in producing, so that people know that it's not being thought about.
Just another FYI, as of yesterday, we just received the draft transportation plan. That's going around for comment. Right now, there's no mention of the community center or Lot 2, so I don't know if that's something that we need to mention within that plan, but it could at least anyways be a useful resource for any consultant as well. So that's something to bear in mind, because there is mention of work going on for Cardina Road, so I don't know. So perhaps that report or that plan could be of interest to this committee.
We definitely need a bus stop.
Why wouldn't it mention the community center?
That's what I'm just realizing now, like that's something I might take back, but, so there's an opportunity there for.
Yeah, if there's one
It's a
project
high
that's
le-
gonna
it's a
have
higher-
an impact on transportation in and around this area.
It's a quite a high level document, so it might be just covered off in, it's, emerging multimodal, but perhaps we need to reconsider whether we make specific mention of this. So something else just that's.
There is a draft in existence now?
It's just gone to, it's gone to committee now, so it's starting its, so do you want, would this committee be interested in reviewing that plan?
I don't think it's appropriate for another committee to review it until council season.
Fair enough, okay.
In the referral process from council,
Yeah.
then
Okay.
include the community center.
Do you know the timing on that? Just if we're gonna be procuring somebody who's gonna take a look at
March
traffic?
26th is supposed to come to council,
Correct.
my understanding.
All right.
Okay, carrying on. There's some geotechnical additional information that we are working on.
And I just wanted to bring that to the table today. So one of the recommendations is we've already got some geotechnical studies of the area, but now that the footprint is kind of more defined within the DD stage of development, it's a good idea to do some extra geotechnical studies where there's potentially extra fill so we can validate the risk associated with excavations. We don't come up with unforeseen issues during construction, so we're going to
Just to
Move forward with that.
clarify what that means, there's a portion of the site, basically beginning at the fence, which separates the soccer field, and then that whole area where Craig is going there, all the way up really in line with the knoll where the bench is, which you'll see there's alder trees there, and it's clearly been an area where there's been fill dumped over a long period of time. We don't know how deep it is. We don't have any sense of what the quality of that fill is. It's underneath a good portion of the building, particularly into the large multi-purpose room. And we'd like to know where bedrock occurs under that area, so we know how much space we have underneath the building and how much blasting we might have to do to achieve the space that we need there for services and so on.
I think it's also important for the parking area as well, just in terms of the base laid for getting solid parking that isn't going to be like this in a year.
It is kind of interesting, if you go out there, you can really see the difference. There's green underbrush, very bright colored, and alder, and then all of a sudden you transition to forest floor and leafy detritus and trees, and it's like, it's a line. So clearly something's happened in there, so this is work that is worth it. It's a little forensic.
I think we should take a whole.
Couple
Okay, just going through, so this is, again, the design development report will capture a lot of this and summarize it in a way that's sort of presentable. Then we get onto the building design, and so in the building design section, we will have an overall review of the design concept, how the building's organized, and then we'll get into far more detail architecturally about, you remember we did this room data sheets, where we're trying to capture all the really specific information for each room in order to make sure that that is included in our costing at that point. So we've gone through our data sheets and updated them again. We're adding a lot more detail to those. The room data sheets will be things that are specific to individual rooms, and then we have what's called an outline specification, and that is a lot more technical information about the building as a whole. So building envelope, roofing materials, framing type, all sorts of building level.
And if you guys recall, the impetus for getting a DD report is a cost level study that has a higher level of cost certainty, so it's more like what we refer to as a class C. And that's why you have more and more technical data and more written data. So this report's going to a professional quantity surveyor when it's done for them to do takeoffs on the actual materials and number of materials, quantity of materials.
Yeah. And we won't get into that kind of detail today, but this is really just to outline, this is the work that we're working on right now, and it's a big chunk of work. In the building design, we will also have a specific report from structural, including drawings and sizing of structural members and slab thickness and all that kind of thing. The mechanical report will go through systems, and I'll show you just briefly sort of where we're at. Electrical report as well, and probably building code compliance, just to give everybody a level of comfort that what we're designing is achievable from a building code point of view. We'll also have a section on sustainability, the initiatives that we're proposing be included in the project. And so when we're talking about this design development report, there will be a time before this goes for approval where we'll come back and we'll present all of this in detail, so that if there's, decisions to be made at that point, the steering committee will have a chance to do that before we recommend it to council.
Just to reiterate some of the assumptions that the team's using to move forward is that we're doing sustainable design initiatives within the scope and boundaries of the project. There may be other things that can be enhanced or added on as additional scope or making the building more future ready, but those currently aren't within the budget. And if we're going to move forward with them, it would be changing the building and some of the infrastructure significantly. So the achievable results within the scope are going to be clearly outlined in the report.
So under this, you'll see there's sort of introduction to sustainability, talking about the strategies we're using. Energy modeling and optimization, that is a process during the design process right now. You remember we talked about doing this sort of energy study during design development? That's what's happening now. So we've scheduled it for the 20th. The consultants, we've been iterating with consultants, just coming up with the right design and making sure that it's coordinated in these past couple weeks. And then now that we're all kind of on board with the components of the design, we're going to come together and sit down and have a workshop where we test the energy performance of the building and do some fine tuning around the building envelope and the efficiency of some equipment and orientation of windows and that sort of thing, in order to propose our kind of best case scenario for the design of the building.
So 20th is start or end?
20th is a meeting date. So currently the mechanical consultant's preparing the energy model and geometry and base assumptions. And then on the 20th, the design team, just the consultant design team, will meet in order to work through the tough questions of what makes sense to do and how are we performing and what's the target.
I think that's it. Just as a reminder, and some of the reminders, Raj, I'm doing for your benefit. That piece of information will go also not just to the building, so we know about the building, but it's a key piece of input to the operational cost budget.
Yeah, and actually that is how we test the energy performance. Is the model is representative of all of the components of the building itself, including all the equipment and how it's heated and what the operating temperature is and what the climate data is in the area. And by adjusting equipment and assemblies, we can say, oh, if you add 1 inch of insulation, you increase your capital cost, but you end up paying it back in 3 years, and then the rest you save on operating costs over the long term. And so that kind of analysis is exactly what the workshop's all about. And so, yeah, it's actually more driven by operating cost than it is capital cost. If anything, what we'll come back to do is say, here's a premium piece of design work that we think should be included because it's worth it. In 3 years, you'll have paid for that extra capital cost, and after that, it's gravy. Yeah, exactly.
So just for clarification, are we going to have, let's just say we put a whole bunch of solar panels on there and stuff like that. Would that even come into it at this point? just so the public can have a look at it and say, hey, you know what, it's gonna cost us $800,000 to put these solar panels on, but we're gonna recover it.
It's a partial
That's some reasons.
strategy. I mean, the modeling looks in a more holistic way at the building.
Yeah,
And potential strategies and the gains, potential gains in the life cycle of the building.
I'm gonna say no.
Well, and
So-
I guess,
So no is a good answer.
The other answer
yeah,
is-
those are good answers.
So there's-
Because
but
that would be, you need a photovoltaic consultant to look at that as an additional sustainability strategy layered on top of the
Okay.
building. I think what
Alright,
we're looking
yeah,
at is
understood.
here's the framework of the project, here's the capabilities,
Yeah.
and that might be, you know, just like, let's say, water retention or any other sort of measure that's over and above.
yeah, so
What
this,
we've asked the team to do would be a layered on piece.
we've only kind of gotten into the first part of our sort of questions for today, and you'll find that
Okay.
the building itself actually has quite a few complicated elements in it already.
Okay,
And so just in order to run the building and have, you know, backup power where we need it and all that sort of thing, I think we've got more than we can handle. The sustainability measures for the building itself will be taken care of. What you're talking about with solar panels and with rainwater harvesting and that sort of thing are sort of additional strategies that may at one point make sense if you have the right expertise to look at it and study it. And
yeah, I don't wanna go into it too deep, but I just know that that's a question that's gonna come from the public is, you know, what if you looked into all these different alternatives and, you know,
It'll come from
these are real
somewhere.
cheap now and, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's just something we're gonna have
To
to.
me, it's more having the internal wiring available so you could put it on later.
Solar ready would be a requirement.
Yes,
So
okay.
that's sort of a non-issue.
But it should be written in the report somewhere because the public doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
Just like they don't understand the
Yeah.
different grades in the building code between,
exactly.
yeah.
Right.
But yet, when we met with the school district, last week or the week before, it was one of the things we asked them is, that they got some data on the impact on their electricity bills and electricity usage since they put the solar panels up. And
Yeah.
they said they did, so then they said they would get us them.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And we do that a lot with schools that are existing already. So
Yeah.
it's not as if, like, solar panels are actually a really easy thing to integrate, even with an existing building
Yeah.
that wasn't designed for solar ready. It's another piece of equipment, but like, it's absolutely not the end of the world to add it to any existing building.
Yeah,
So,
perfect.
just going down our table of contents,
sorry.
we'll also have a section on certification and rating systems, and this is more of a, it may be, we're not actually doing this, but we want to put the project in the context of sustainability rating systems. So this has not ever been a LEED project or a passive house project or anything like that. I think there will need to be some communication in the document about where the building fits in terms of sustainability in the context of what everybody in the public has heard about sustainability. So the one thing that we would like to talk about today is the step code target, which at the moment today, we are not required to meet because it's a new, it's not a rating system, but it's a performance target that has been established that will become a code compliance element in the future. But based on the rate we're moving, that future we might actually fall right into
Might
it.
be in the
like-
future.
Exactly, like municipalities are already adopting step code targets for different building types.
Has
And-
Bowen Island done any of that yet?
No, we've talked about it,
Chatted, yeah.
but I think we're just sticking to step one right now. We're gonna be looking at it probably over the next 6 months to a year. I know the North Shore municipalities, I
Yeah, they've
think have
all
moved
done
to
three.
step two. or
They're all at
three?
three.
Three,
They're
yeah.
at 3.
And I would recommend that for the sake of a municipally
Yeah.
funded project, that the project be studied in the context of
Three.
step 3 performance. So that would include measuring the total energy demand,
Yeah.
doing air infiltration testing, doing what's necessary to meet that sort of municipal level step code compliance. Because I think at some point, it's gonna be expected of the municipality anyway.
No question.
So if that is the case, I'd like some sort of like endorsement that, yes, we would like to include that as a target,
Because that's
and
it.
it'll affect a bit of what we do at the energy modeling workshop.
I suggest a resolution, maybe, Gary?
Yeah.
Along that lines, that,
And to be clear, is this slightly outside the boundaries of the work that they're already doing, or is this already within
Yeah.
the work they're doing?
It's, I think, only slightly. Like, they need to do a little bit more calculation in terms of total energy demand, but I don't think it's a huge piece of work. I think it is the perfect time to make the decision to target that, because it will influence how we document the building, and also what we include in terms of some of the construction requirements for the contractor about air infiltration testing and that kind of thing. So-
It's incrementally adding some costs to the
Yes.
project, and I think we just have to acknowledge that.
I think it's actually
We
gonna
want to,
give you,
Because I'm gonna be doing a budget update, and we have to also provide this to the QS to say, hey, also consider we're gonna be asking the contractor for these sort of enhanced requirements as part of the commissioning process for the facility, which they should make some allowances for with their unit rates.
I think the best thing about adopting that as a target is that it will be the most effective way to demonstrate that you want to take a leadership role in sustainability without having to pursue things like studying whether solar makes sense or not, or proving that geotech, like geothermal
Doesn't work.
and proving that rainwater collection is actually going to get you nothing. Like, targeting something that is current, that is out in the sort of public sphere as a ambitious target is the best thing I think we need to do.
I think that from a public perception point of view, I think I would highly recommend it, that we go to 3.
plus it's inevitable.
And that's the sort of thing that the public, and if we say, hey, there's gonna be a little bit of additional cost, or this is part of the reason that the cost escalated to a certain extent, is that we did decide to go to step 3.
Right.
And I think that'll sit well with the public.
I think it'll also set the project up to qualify for more of those like grant funding programs where, the municipality has great ambitions and there's some kind of support grant to help implement the step code.
Can I just
I'm
ask
hoping that there's something like that.
an important question? Would step 3 be sufficiently high enough to be able to go?
I think
It's
so.
incrementally, hugely expensive to go beyond that.
Yeah,
No, but to get to, if we were to go to step 3, do you think it's high enough in the sustainability range to be able to attract grant funding?
Don't know.
Oh,
I don't know.
No,
I think
stage 3 is a cutoff, eh?
No, there's all sorts of different stages. It depends on your.
No, I know
building,
that, but as far as the government,
I don't know I haven't seen
Yeah.
grant funding yet related to the step.
No, but is it,
specifically.
do you think there's enough in there in terms of sustainability that we could?
Like measures that.
You could
I-
add that,
I-
you could add
I
that
think
to
the
your,
problem
to
is-
your
To
proposal, say,
sustainability.
yeah, we're gonna achieve step 3, and that's certainly not gonna hurt.
because it is a step up from what we would normally do in this
Yeah,
Absolutely.
place in time.
you just brought up the topic of grant funding, and I just was wondering if there's enough in
Yeah,
there to
that's it.
leverage.
Yeah,
It might not be like the key point, that it's either grant funding, but it's definitely
An extra
if you-
layer.
an extra layer.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it may actually, because
There may be something.
there's all
that
sorts of
comes out
stuff in the sort of step code approach to sort of building science that gets you far further ahead than the ways that we measure building performance before. So, thermal bridging, measuring all of thermal bridging between materials from the inside to the outside. Just briefly, the concept is that if you have materials that, you've got insulation, but you don't have insulation everywhere. Somewhere you have wood and sometimes you have steel studs, that sort of thing. Those make bridges through the wall and you lose energy. So just taking a look and measuring that and trying to reduce the amount of thermal bridging makes a huge difference. Same with air tightness. Like, all that energy loss happens with air transfer. And so if you can demonstrate that you actually have a tight building as opposed to, draw it on
yeah.
a piece of paper that you have it, it just it's so
It's
much
a
more
certification.
effective.
It's a certification, really, isn't it?
Well, and those strategies are so much more effective than simple technical assemblies and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think it's definitely the way to go with building design now.
And so, and related, because passive house is really a hot topic as well, and as leads maybe waning a little bit, but
Yeah.
how are we going to address the question why we didn't certify?
You mean
The
lead
cost,
certification or
yeah,
passive
yeah.
house certification?
Yeah,
or-
so
Step 3 is probably John Lee.
But who is writing that
Short
portion in this document? And I guess it's gonna lead to a place, because these are all great things, but the first report is public, right? It was part of an open meeting. And so you have a lot of information here. Is it going to be public, or is it gonna be summarized in such a way, like how are we controlling the communications within this? Does the municipality need to want a hand in sort of drafting that within this document, so it isn't all coming from the consultant team?
Well, it may be, because, I mean, from a building point of view, we need to capture all of the detail that we can in this report for our own sake. But that report could come to this committee only, and then the proposal to council could be based on a
Summary.
redacted, blacked out report or something like that.
I don't think it needs to be redacted, but I think it just needs to be controlled as to
Right.
what are, like, why are we making these decisions? Here's the data, here's the rating systems,
Yeah.
and it's very expensive, but we need to also have the due diligence of saying why it's very expensive to inform the decision-making process within this report, otherwise it's unanswered.
And so what you're highlighting is the difference between the design process for the building and the communication process to the
Yeah.
public. And so it's a good point. We'd like to keep going full steam ahead with our design process to the end of design development, including costing super accurately or whatever. But the decision of how that gets approved to go to the next gate and what is released to the public as information from the report, that's a totally different conversation.
So keep the content informational.
I think we want to keep this report authored by us and the consultant team with all the information and all of our backup material. And at the point where it comes to the steering committee and the steering committee has to recommend that it go to council for approval, that's the point at which to say, yeah, but let's just describe this as opposed to release all the background data or all of the finished materials or all the technical info. But I think what we want to do is we want to keep going with our work
Yeah, agreed.
and.
But you want this piece of direction,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there
Which
was
we
a
should
direction,
take-
I think.
which we should take to
And our
council.
recommendation to go to step 3 is, as Craig said earlier, to establish that the municipality is in a leadership role regarding sustainability without jumping into the pool. You know, if this were to be, if this was a passive house certified building, then this is not a project. Because it's, the cost is, the incremental
Yeah.
cost increase is just astounding.
We could give you that number pretty easily, actually, just for insulation alone,
Yeah.
like, just to meet the
Or the
insulation.
European
allowance.
windows, or, you know, I mean,
Probably
there's,
what, at least 50%, did you say?
oh.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Or is it that high?
No, it would just mean, it would mean a redesign of the building, basically,
Well, true, yeah.
for just the envelope.
So a recommendation for
Think about the
council.
language when we put it together. Maybe we don't talk about certifications because it was already decided that we're not certifying the building and we're just talking about the step code, and that's adding due diligence and benefit to the municipality and the people that live here, as opposed to opening up that question again.
Yeah,
Correct.
What we have
Leave it
heard
passive.
in
That's a
the
good point.
public meetings that have occurred, the feedback that we've heard around this question has been more focused on step code compliance than on achieving some kind of LEED
Okay.
goal or achieving some kind of passive house standard. So, and so the portion of the community who are really knowledgeable about it, that's what they're looking at. So I think if we can demonstrate that we're achieving a certain, you know, realistic step code objective, that's what we should be targeting.
and the reason why the step code, like, is gathering some momentum, it's actually based on passive house design principles, but it's basically taking a more practical approach. It's like, you don't have to be absolute minimum energy performance, you just need to be smart about it. And the way to be smart about it is to
Do good
like
design.
reduce thermal bridging and maximize the barrier of air, like air infiltration, reducing air. So
You want to try to achieve a balance between the thermal envelope of the building and the mechanical systems that are heating and cooling the building. So you don't have big loads on the machinery to keep everything balanced and a good indoor air quality. So that's sort of in a nutshell where you're going with Passive House. You're aiming at having no machinery doing anything. So it's a whole different.
So I'm just wondering if this should be a future FAQ. Just-
Well, definitely.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you said it needs to go to council to be decided on. Is that true? Can the steering committee just say we want to target step code 3?
No?
I just have, sorry,
Huh?
just a comment. I think, just listening to the conversation, I think we just, when it comes to the FAQ or talking with the public, I think we just embrace the fact that we're gonna go for step 3. And just sort of
Step
say,
three
we are
compliance.
taking the lead on this and not compare it to lead or.
Exactly,
Passive
exactly. I
I think
totally
that's-
agree.
that's-
Totally agree. I
And
get
I,
it.
and I guess where my concern was coming from is I've seen projects at this stage do a lead scorecard as part of the report and say, we're not going for a lead, but here's the scorecard, you can do
Yeah,
lead goal.
exactly.
And
It's
that's
a total
more problematic
shit.
approach in trying to control those communications and saying, everyone says, well, you got the scorecard, you can do it, why aren't you doing it? And I think we need to actually change that message from the certifications to maybe change it to just sustainability and step code as
Yeah.
opposed to certifications.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and the only reason I would go to council is because there's going to be an upcharge on it.
But they're gonna see that upcharge on all sorts of stuff. We haven't got to that part yet.
Great.
But
It would
sorry,
be- I
I've
think it would be-
interrupted the conversation on the resolution. Sorry.
Sorry, on the what resolution?
Res-
On the resolution. Well, should we have a resolution, Kathy?
I think for
This is a discussion.
Lisa's clarity, maybe if we just do some of the things, just action items or by unanimous consent.
Okay.
So this one would be that we support moving forward with step 3.
To the council, maybe?
No, I just think.
It's
just
just a
Oh,
meeting
okay.
minute
With the-
resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Ultimately, the
towards step
council's
3
Or
or
we-
achieving step.
No, achieving, yes.
Yeah, achieving. Embrace.
Great. Can't
No,
can't go there.
touchy-feely.
Yeah.
Complying.
Moving forward?
Okay.
Yeah.
Then just keeping going with this table of contents idea for the report. Sorry, do you have a?
Lisa, if you got something there, just.
Just as an action item, that
Just as an
the
action
committee
item.
support moving forward with step 3 for the community center.
All in favor? Kathy, no?
Oh, yeah, step 3 of the building code.
Step 3 of the building code.
Step code level 3.
Okay, there we go.
Is it in
Sorry.
compliance with that, or is
Yeah,
it
it'll be in
moving forward?
compliance.
It's in compliance, so I think that's what
Moving
it's moving
forward.
forward.
It's a target, so,
Yeah, because we don't, since we haven't established, Kate, step 3 at the municipality, I don't know if we're going to be in compliance, but we will be in compliance.
I
So
would say.
moving forward is a bit big. What
to-
it's what-
What you want to target step code level 3
Would be aligned, yes.
Performance.
Support. Sorry.
targeting step code level 3 performance.
Performance.
But we want to be able to get level 3 if we're going and striving for it. We don't want to just miss it by.
Oh, no, we'll
Well,
get it, yeah.
When you just target it and then you're,
Then you hit the
They
target.
hit the target.
Just like,
or for some reason you missed the target, like at least you were targeting it. Don't worry, we're gonna meet the target, but like from a wording or
We
good
should
job.
get 98%, we spend all the
We-
money and then we
we-
miss it
we-
because we can put
it's-
special
It's
to
I
work.
think at this point, because the studies haven't been done, you can't confirm you're hitting the target.
Okay.
So right now, because
It's just the
as
starting.
the team goes into doing the studies and completing their design development envelope details,
I think it's a direction and an intent
It's an
to
intent.
get there, yeah. Perfect, thank
Okay,
you.
so then this last section is, like in the SD report, we added a section that was all about kind of the overall project and where we're at and looking ahead. And so there will be design development cost estimate which will be basically April 2018 cost estimate, like Sam was saying. It'll be a smaller spread, plus and minus. It'll be more like 10 to 15%, I think, is Class C, something like that, or plus 15, minus 10.
Depends if you're in New Zealand, UK, or Canada, but yeah, it's around there.
And then we will need some input, if we want to include it in this design development report, information about the overall financial plan, communication and public engagement, and looking ahead. And we can start including those things in this document, or if we're talking about maybe separating a public document from the design development report, maybe not all of this stuff is
That was a
necessary.
question I had for this group, is if we delete section 5 altogether and we do that as more of a separate project summary report. So I handed out to the steering committee members a sort of preliminary, which we're going to start doing more frequently, this project management summary report of where the project's at. And it's those components basically associated with part 5 of this document. And the key pieces that we included in the SD cost report were, where's the page? If you flip to the third page where schedule's at the top, it would be a milestone chart saying where we're at. And then the following page, budget, a summary budget update. And an option which we haven't come to a full conclusion on yet in terms of the financing solution, which we have a nice little graphic of on the bulletin boards at the public open house. It was that beehive graphic. So those three components, and I guess the question is, do we want to include them in this report, or do we want them in a separate report that's in a more briefing note style format that goes to council for their recommendation and approval of gate 3? I am hearing what you're saying.
My suggestion is that there's going to be far more information in this design development report than you will want to broadcast, because it's everything.
So keep it separate.
So it would make sense to me that what goes to council is a summary document that doesn't get into how thick the foundation walls are.
And the energy report, and if someone in the community is very interested and wants to come to Community Hall and look at that information and sit with someone and talk about the project, we can all do that if it's that important. But this is going to be a big technical design document, and part 5 could almost be missed in terms of the review process. And we could include in part 5, when we do a summary report, a general status update of the architectural process and what the design development report is as part of this for that gate approval document. And that's more typically how we've done it with municipalities on the project management side.
I mean, we could even pull forward a very summarized version of the ingredients that are in this
Kind of like our
list.
PowerPoint we did last time together.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is usually how we do it. We cut and paste from your technical work and make
Yeah.
sure that those
Yeah.
infographics and key elements are included in the summary report, so that the decision makers have the context of what they're deciding on. If they want to read all that technical information that's there.
And your cell numbers, of course.
I agree.
So,
Can we say, yes, I heard one yes, but
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good, okay.
Agreed, yeah.
Thank
okay,
you.
so we will
We'll
assume
strike-
that there's going to be a
strike-
separate communication component to
You
the
can
design.
strike 5 from your table of
Yeah.
contents, and I'll prepare a summary that's independent.
Okay. Okay, now, this is all sort of going a little bit sideways from one.
Plan.
Let me just,
Plan B. It's going to change it.
So we're not going over this thing right now?
Nope.
Changes to the design.
yes. Maybe we'll spend, what's our timing for this meeting, just so that we can.
Well, right till noon.
Right till noon, okay.
There's a close.
Portion.
I assume you guys would have a 12:30 period, but so I made an appointment for 12:15, so I can go and change it if you want to stay longer.
We
the
are
ferry
moving
is
into
at
a closed
12.
at some point in
Oh,
time.
oh.
Or 1:10.
But we're going into a closed before that you don't have to be here for.
Okay.
Well,
Would you want more time? Because
No, I think, I just wanted to get a sense of, that's what I had assumed, and
I
so
just didn't see that.
let's just carry on, and if we start running out of time, we'll alter the time.
We've been seeing that there's a lot of ground to cover, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we want to do is just go through a few of the design changes that have been made since the last time we saw it. I'm pretty sure that the BIM component is the primary component. So, I'm assuming everybody, you don't need an introduction to the plan anymore. We'd just like to talk about the BIM area. And so this entire sort of wing has been redesigned. Some of it looks similar, but some of it's changed. The biggest change is that through our discussion with the design working group, we kind of landed on the idea that there's really a separation between the municipal hall, and particularly municipal hall reception, and the community center, which will likely need its own reception. And those are totally separate functions. That BIM is got hours during the week, and then when it's closed, there's nobody there, and it's secured, but there's still after hours and on the weekends. There's going to be a huge demand for somebody to do point of sale, signing up programs, resetting the Wi-Fi password, unclogging the drain at the coffee shop. Maybe not that. But so what we've done is actually, the reception area is still in the same location, but we've provided a separation between what is the BIM reception. Everybody see that little hand going by the way? BIM reception, which is behind a secure wall or screen, and community center reception, which also leads to the discussion about staffing, and I think that maybe has already happened, and has the idea of staffing happened?
We have some stuff.
So this
These
particular,
assumptions are okay, we can carry on?
this
think so.
particular step has sort of multiple layers of implications. But we really felt it was an important understanding of how the building operates and what really needs to happen. That this is, first of all, a community center. There needs to be a community center, a reception area, and it's secondarily a home for the municipal offices, and they need their own reception area. And that reception area can't be the reception area for the building. So that's the first level, and then as Craig said, then there's the staffing issue about that. There's a communication issue about that. There's questions about the computer networks within the building, who's connected to what. So and we'll talk more about these things. But the first move is the separation of reception, that there is a community center reception, and secondarily, there's a reception area to the municipal offices, which is only open when the municipal offices are open.
So the other thing that we sort of raised a flag about was hearing about, why is the municipal hall in the community center anyway? And so I think there's a very compelling story to tell, and that communication is going to get out there. And so, as we've talked about before, this meeting room is a community space and can be identified as such. At the other end, there's another community meeting space that could use this kitchenette as a support
And
space.
assuming those two doors that go into the municipal hall would lock off.
Exactly. That's easy enough to do.
Now, what about the water closet?
That's
How would we
big.
lock off
That would be
also?
just for BIM. So at the moment, what we've done is redesigned this internal BIM area in order to revisit the question of who needs a closed office, who needs an open office. And there's been a lot of discussion about this mixture, and essentially we've flipped some of the closed offices to the internal wall, which actually gives us the opportunity to develop more of an art wall that is something, significant. And we've achieved the sort of minimum number of closed offices. The offices that are closed offices are sized just large enough that if you needed to, you could actually have 2 workstations in a closed office. So the design of, and then there's a large open office space that is now open to the exterior, so we got a lot more daylight into the depth of the office. And there'll also be some skylighting above this space. So
You
there-
have glass walls on the interior walls on those
On-
closed offices.
Exactly, yeah. So the light would get all the way back. So there's been a lot of effort put into how that is gonna work. And I think, this is the current configuration. What we're lacking are, there's constant pressure all over the building on storage spaces.
Yeah.
And we will continue to try to find those in smaller pockets, but that is going to be an issue from the beginning. So maybe if there's any comments about this sort of BIM office arrangement, the separation of community center and reception, yeah?
No.
This is a question for staff, I guess. Have you future-proofed this? Is there enough space to grow?
No,
There is.
absolutely not.
Because
That's not enough
that's
to
a-
grow.
that's a-
But that's a fact, right?
Okay.
That's just something
But that's also-
we have to look at down the road.
That's also a public perception is, what's the municipality's just gonna grow and take up all the, if we get some vacant
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
But currently, the way the closed offices are, there's only actually one person in those offices at the moment, and
Yeah.
it did say that it could
That's why I was
potentially
thinking
have
of-
2 people in them if there was growth that way.
So this really only satisfies current demand?
Correct, yes,
Mhm.
yes.
There
And-
are,
and
there are 2 or 3 workstations that are identified for staff who are not yet.
So there's some expansion in the
There is a
workstation.
little.
There's a little bit, there's like 2 people worth of expansion, I think.
So how do we address, because that is something that I'm getting stopped actually in the school hallway now, that this is such a hot topic, that people are so concerned.
I'm getting stopped at Municipal Hall all the time
Okay.
about it.
But I don't know, but it's, for some reason, this has become a topic.
Yeah,
And so concerned about.
About whether staff would start to take over recreational space.
oh, no, I think what would happen.
So hence
Yeah.
why I'm
Yeah.
bringing this up now.
Yeah, you know what I
that
think a good
For some
answer-
reason, this is a story that's starting to
Wow.
circulate.
Yeah, no, what I see is what we're doing with Public Works, where as we grow, like a lot of
Find other
municipalities will have to look at satellite offices. But,
So maybe we need to bring that into.
yeah, maybe that's something
Sure.
for the FAQ, yeah.
What are
Yeah.
the strategies to help, like to keep up with the growth of
Yeah.
the community?
Yeah,
But I'm just flagging that.
yeah,
That's
no,
why-
I hadn't heard from that perspective that there was this fear that we would take over other spaces, but.
There's really no
It's not
provision to
designed
take,
for those.
that you couldn't expand beyond the current boundaries of the BIM office.
But we should make that clear for sure, yeah.
that- Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I envision long after I've gone, as we grow, that, maybe we move another department into a satellite office or
Okay, so
something.
that would be the growth strategy
Yeah, that would be the
for, on the
strategy.
municipal,
Yeah.
okay, so I think we could add that in.
FAQ.
You may also
add that
have
to
people
Communications.
kind of arguing the opposite. Most municipalities, when they build municipal space, are actually bringing people from satellite offices
Mhm.
into municipal hall because there's a need for people to be together rather than to be in remote locations. So I mean, we may get that concern. I mean, that's my first concern
Yeah.
is we're building municipal hall, but we don't have enough space in it for
Expansion.
expansion or even for our existing needs, because our
Correct.
existing needs, we've got people in satellite locations or moving into
And then
satellite
we're
locations.
moving in a month or two
Yeah,
to satellite locations, yeah.
And what
and we're not bringing them back
And what
in.
schools do, other municipalities have done, which is the portable solution.
Yeah,
That isn't,
That's
doesn't
not
solve
like
that parking issue,
Yeah.
it's just gonna trigger other risks
Yeah.
and not be a.
But to be clear, this is not
This is-
ideal from a municipal perspective,
But if
for
you're
sure.
thinking of the public works department, which is roads and infrastructure, as the satellite office, I think most municipalities have that group
Yeah, outside.
somewhere else where all the trucks.
But they still
and
have their
everything are.
management within the main
Yeah.
office.
But they still have the
Yeah.
man, okay.
But it's definitely not ideal from our perspective, but that's what it is, right? So,
Yeah.
It is what it is,
Yeah.
but I mean logistically,
yeah,
I probably
It's a
would
pain.
see myself needing access to Bob 2-3 times a day.
yeah.
Yeah,
And having him in a remote, or having that person
yeah.
in a remote location just kind of creates inefficiencies.
Adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah, or adds a layer. of-
So is there some
Hopefully.
way to direct the design if the foundation was such that an addition could be put on top of one end or something, like this end?
I think
That
a
would be a
vertical-
change.
A vertical addition would be challenging. Horizontally, it would be less challenging.
Yeah. Or if you find that's all filled, then down below.
But yeah, I don't think we're entertaining that unless we're really entertaining that, in which case, like, that's a
Big
design exercise.
Yeah. Move Raj and I into the crawl space underneath the performing arts facility. I think it's cool.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because we don't have the money to make it any.
No,
better.
no, and
We're
like-
already getting blasted by the public.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
other-
yeah, we're not looking
The other
at
thing
it.
is just, one thing that came up, is some people would say that this is an extremely luxurious
Yeah.
municipal hall.
Uh,
Some people would
We
say.
should tape it out on the floor, because it's not luxurious, I'll tell you that.
Just
Size or
in, no,
finish or
in
what?
building, you know.
Brand new facility.
Yeah, you know, ideally a square box is the cheapest way you can go with a flat roof. Some people would say that this, you know, and that's what our
We don't
municipal
deserve
hall should be,
natural
rather than this, this sort of design.
Well, I mean,
Well,
that-
I don't think it's that much different.
Yeah,
I think
let's
we
just,
need to
let's
understand
I
just
just think we
the
need to
get a
system
picture of what the
involved.
design actually is. Like, this is a wood frame building on
Yeah.
a slab on grade, and the
Square
municipal
box.
hall is like engineered trusses, like, you're,
It doesn't get any cheaper.
yeah.
It does,
It's cheaper than
it's 500,
house
500.
I'm just throwing that out there so I can throw that back
No, I
at some
Well,
people.
given the
500
scope of
construction,
the
2 by
project
6
is
walls.
defined, I just think we need to address that issue.
Yeah.
And it maybe is addressed through alternative ways like modern ways of working in offices. Maybe people, I don't think 2 people in an office at the same time is a solution,
I
but
don't either.
office sharing. I mean, basically,
Makes
trying to
sense.
get into the modern concept, you know, one person is working from home 2 days a week, another person is working from home 3 days a week. We may have to go to those kind
Yeah.
of strategies given limited space.
We
given that
have
limited space.
taken some of that.
There is some, like, part of the reason for gathering all of this open space together is that the size of these furnishing solutions for workstations, you can do a smaller version of that and squeeze people in, like, if you reconfigure
Squeeze.
the area.
This little open meeting space could be hot desks, for instance.
Yeah, that's space there.
And we're assuming a systems furniture approach to the open space planning.
So this could be reconfigured in a tighter format, but at the moment, like, it's absolutely not worth showing that until it's necessary.
I think it's just a fact, right? And we've lost the mayor's office in that. So your word was squeeze, and we're being squeezed right now, but that's just the fact. So I think
it's just better,
One
but
corner
hopefully-
of the CIO office.
Allison.
So the mayor's office is here,
Yeah,
sharing that staff meeting room.
yeah.
There is potential for another workstation here in this particular layout.
Or like
And
officials
then those
and,
workstations, again, there are a variety of
Yeah.
smaller versions where not everybody has an L.
And those receptions could be workstations.
To get another.
All this is pointing out is that it's challenging, and it's
Yeah.
challenging for the future. I think to go to Gary's point, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we just had a steering committee meeting, and I think one of the things you were saying, Gary, what we talked about was some of the community out there is just not happy that there's a municipal office component as part of the community center. And I'm hearing that from a lot of people. And that's, again, just another fact that we have there. So it is being perceived as new luxurious offices for Municipal Hall, Empire Building, however you want to look at it. Even that untouchable subject that there's going to be future expansion of staff needs as the community grows. So, but again, these are just things we have to live with.
So the other thing I'm hearing though back is that there's concern that it's already too small,
Yes?
and so not to support it because of that.
Yes,
Because
I agree. I've heard that too.
And again, the municipal offices aspect or the entire
The whole
building?
thing.
Yeah,
So
that's why there's no community
So
center.
there's,
in
so
that.
there's, so it's wrong because it's too big and luxurious, and it's wrong because it's too small, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
No, I think what
Boy,
they're saying,
that's
the
a
big and
catch.
Wow, there you
luxurious is
go.
just the offices, is what they're referring
Yeah.
to.
Right, and I mean,
Yeah,
if,
not the.
if that
community
is
portion.
really,
Well-
if that is really the issue to be addressed, we can address that like today, because it's absolutely not luxurious.
I know, but how do we now start to get people on board with that? Like that's.
I think
something-
you probably
That's-
won't get people on board if they don't wanna have the municipal hall in the community center.
Correct.
That's
I'm
what
su-
it is,
what
yeah.
what I'm surprised at, it's who is trying to voice it, it's people I didn't,
I think
was
it's-
not
I think-
expecting, and so I'm like, ooh.
Can
I think it's strictly a communication item, this whole deal. I mean, a lot of people think that if we get rid of the municipal hall, we're just gonna fill this with a gymnasium and squash courts and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Or leave commercial
And it's
space.
gonna happen, yeah.
So is that
So
the
they're saying, why are
feedback?
you wasting the space with the municipal hall when it could be
Yes.
something else?
Correct.
Okay, and so
And-
like,
so
not
that's-
to dig this all up again, but we were wondering the same thing. It's like, well, leave the municipal hall where it is and then build a community center.
I
But-
call us the wart on the side of the community center.
Well, but,
It's a little
are we really?
Well, that's what we are, we're
I
a
mean,
big
this
wart.
is,
Well,
we
Started
we
determining
cycle
that we
back
need.
around this conversation every time we meet. And we've done everything we can, I think, in terms of planning to really understand how these two quite disparate functions can coexist in a single building. But you can't, we've gone, to Craig's point, the wing that has the municipal offices in it is not luxurious from a construction perspective. It's drywall and studs and pre-engineered gang nail trusses.
Yeah, yeah.
It's as cheap as it gets.
No, I
So
understand that.
that's not luxurious in terms of the quality of the space. If the space itself, by being the space there, is a luxury, then that's an insurmountable
Yeah.
problem. So, and that's not for us to determine as a design team, but we do need some direction on that. You can't just take that generic drywall space and turn it into squash courts and keep the
No.
budget the same.
No, I
It's gonna
understand,
go
I understand
astronomical.
that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we gotta change the roof.
I understand
No, but
that,
that's-
what
that's
has to
the
be
question.
communicated.
Yeah.
In some ways, I'd love to be able to really flip this conversation, and really celebrate the fact that we're gonna have municipal offices down there, because the fact that we don't have a civic presence in the Cove, I think really hampers our ability to engage with the community. This is,
Well-
because we're so lost up here, we're kind of like, so,
Well, then I think
I agree
the
with you,
story,
say a lot of people would
the
say
story
wrong.
when Sam told
I
it
know,
to me was
but
totally
I wish
compelling.
sorry?
The story that Sam told to me was very compelling, and that was primarily a financial story, is that the only reason you can get a community center is by including this municipal component to get you halfway there or something. Like,
We
the
have to
amount
report
that
the way,
the amount that it's contributing is far more than the amount that it's costing to put it in, and you are collecting together rec under one roof, which unto itself is amazing.
But we haven't won any hearts on that.
I know, well, I don't know if that
Just
story's
wonder-
been told.
Or
It has been, but
People,
we
yeah.
haven't been able to back it up with anything.
Right.
So I think that's
so
a big,
this, that's
big
part of the piece of getting the breakout cost for
Yeah.
this.
I don't think it'll make any difference. I mean, this is a visceral reaction, and this is just how members of the community will feel, like they
It'll
don't.
it'll make a small difference to some, it'll make a difference to some people.
It will.
So but then the question eventually would go to either a gate meeting for
Right.
approval for change, or to the referendum when we're asking for funding for the project and change the project. There's only,
Yeah. There's only so much we can talk about now,
Yeah.
other than the strategy to communicate to the public is absolutely
Why it's in
the one tool
It's the
that you
key.
have in order to convince people this is a good idea, is by demonstrating how it's a good idea, which is it's gonna contribute oodles more money than it's gonna cost to build, and it's gonna bring together staff who would normally be dispersed under one roof where the programs are gonna be, and there's gonna be a gathering space for a bunch of age groups that don't have a gathering space.
And there's
Like,
operational cost efficiencies and.
Well, that's-
and
We
when
also
we have
do
to
know,
know.
we
So-
do know how much it's gonna save and how much debt we can service with that, but do we know how much or that's gonna come in the next stages, we don't know what the community offices
Haven't had a
space, or
breakdown.
the community hall
We
space
have a
is
square
gonna
footage
cost.
breakdown,
We got a
but we
square
don't
footage
have
breakdown,
the
yeah,
costs.
but if,
It's very difficult to pair out
Mhm.
part of a total building, a
Yeah.
piece of it, and identify a cost that's realistically associated with that.
So
But
if
we
we
can
can't
ask
do
them
that,
to
then
do
we
that.
can't say, we can't go and say that we're gonna contribute more than the cost of the building when we don't know what the cost of the municipal hall building is.
What's the
Well,
square?
We have to
If you,
have
you can
something
do it
serious.
based
20%.
crudely on the total cost of the building and the square
Square
foot
feet.
percentage of it.
Yeah,
But the other thing we could do at design development
Okay.
is we could ask the cost consultant
Yeah.
to prepare something that's a little bit more accurate to say, forget the theatrical lighting and the,
Yeah, just construction costs.
like, what about just this
So if-
footprint?
yeah.
You know, what is that additional
Okay.
footprint
Yeah.
costing?
So based on the percentages, I did a quick calculation, and basically, we're not contributing to the community center, but we are paying for the offices themselves,
Mhm.
rough and dirty, with tax neutral borrowing.
So there's no efficiencies.
There's no efficient, we're not contributing to the cost of the community center by moving in there.
Oh, interesting, that's not what I heard.
But we were
Yeah.
doing
Okay.
that, I mean, some of the work we had done
Yeah.
earlier was on ongoing operations, and there was certainly a lot of synergy in operating, going on in the business
Yeah.
side.
I
But
think-
the other side is the square foot cost to build the whole building
Mm-hmm.
includes a lot of retractable seating and theater lighting and stuff like that that we wouldn't use, that is added on. So if you went down the level and just the, you know, and I'm assuming in your comments that that's a different type of structure than this side? It's not the same cheap
Partly,
and
yeah,
dirty.
that yellow portion is more of an
So
exposed
therefore,
structure.
that's a cheaper portion to build than that side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
This-
that side
this
is
shows
more
sort of
expensive
where
because
there's
of the
a
size of the building,
nicer
because
structure.
space and lacking inside walls and big beams and all that sort of stuff. And sliding doors and all sorts of things that we wouldn't have in the Muni Hall side.
Can I ask, is it usual for municipal halls to be rented? I mean, are we the only, I mean, is it
Yeah.
just a
They
fact of
usually
like,
own,
they're usually owned, right? So can we leverage that the fact that we don't really have?
And the other thing is, when we first incorporated, we saved money for several years into what we call the capital and stabilization fund. And the purpose of so doing was to build our own municipal hall. We used it for other things, but.
The other key component is just in going forward to the public, if they're gonna get buy-in, is we have to have that land for expansion. Absolutely, no question.
I think part of that conversation too with this is that there would still need to be the rec offices. Like we've talked about how there still needs to be 2 at least closed offices and 4 open workstations and reception in the community center. So when we took those components and the conference room and the meeting rooms out of the square footage, it's only 20% of the total building is what the Muni offices are taking up.
I just don't think, you know, hearing this around the table and hearing this for the last year, I still don't hear, especially based on Raj's calculations, there's not a real, other than operating costs, there's not a really strong argument for including the municipal offices.
Except that we can't keep on renting forever.
Raj, what percentage did you use?
Do you want to stay here?
80 and 20.
I mean, it's not me, it's
It's
not about me, right?
communication
It's about,
perspective,
yeah.
and right, so
Yeah.
that was our strong argument was the cost and that it, that it's,
Efficiencies.
well, no, but in terms of capital costs and that it would help us move towards paying for the entire building. So we need to, because that's no longer valid.
And that's my point.
And I'm concerned.
Programmatically, it would be more common for this building to have a library in it.
Yes.
The building to have a library and for the municipal offices to be in their own building.
The other
We're
piece
moving the
is
library
right,
in the
right now, we're talking about capital costs, not operating
Yeah.
costs.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right, and you also have to pay for heat and water and gas here.
here.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to be paying for heat, water, and gas there regardless. And the
No gas.
efficiencies,
There will be some.
Propane.
there will be, you'll be paying for utilities at both locations, and now you've just double dipped on your operating costs here.
But the main
So-
argument that we've been using for the last year, 2 years, is that having municipal offices there will be a significant contributor to the capital cost of building.
Right.
And my point is that doesn't sound like that's the case, so we have to make sure we're doing the right messaging. And,
Or in the right project.
yeah, absolutely.
So is it too late to pull the municipal offices out? What are we talking, where's this conversation going?
No, this is, I don't know, like, this is
question.
what I've been saying, you know, but it's not about, I'm not looking at this from, my perspective as a CAO, moving our offices up there. I'm looking at this as, will the public buy into
Support this
it?
project.
Will they support it at referendum?
And it's kind of worth asking that question at all points during the
Yeah.
project, because ultimately, that's where we're headed. So,
Yeah.
like, if you don't answer that question
Yeah.
now.
And this is what I brought up with the steering committee a couple of weeks ago, because, you know, I lived on Bowen for 26 years, and my whole family's here, I'm connected. I hear almost continually from people who are related to the CAO going, why the hell are you guys moving into the community center?
How flexible is this space in the future? If, you know, phase 2, the community offices move out and then this space is repurposed for rec space? If it's
I
just
mean-
stud walls, right?
Well, and it's
Great.
actually, it can be
Yeah,
made
curtains.
clear span, so you could
It's
adapt
great
it to
yoga
like,
space,
community meeting rooms, that kind of stuff.
meeting rooms, but it isn't necessarily high-performance rec space.
It wouldn't be a gymnasium, because that would be totally different volume. It wouldn't be a racket court or a swimming pool, because those are just totally different things. But
Yeah.
for
Could be
meeting
library.
space, or for rec offices, or for
Just
moving the weight room,
do
or
one down there.
things that could happen in any other room in the world.
Single story.
So both Jackie and Drew, and Adams, they were half joking, mentioned the idea of the library up there.
Except they just
And-
moved.
I'm actually not joking. I
Yeah.
actually think programmatically,
Yeah?
if you look at the situation
You didn't tell me that.
globally.
We had an agenda.
We're totally off track. But that space, I mean, would actually, within this building, would fairly easily convert to being a library space.
Yeah.
You guys are moving to the
And
Cove
I-
Commons,
and I get the
are
Cove
you? Is
Commons,
that what
yeah.
you're doing? So we're switching the Cove Commons out.
But my 2 cents, in, anybody I talked to about this has no problem with the municipal hall.
Really?
I haven't heard
Yeah.
anybody complain
No,
about it either.
not at all. As a matter of fact, I think it's very worthwhile.
Just in terms of process,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, hear what everyone's saying, but the whole point we established a gate review process and public meetings was so that these decisions could be made. So the question, is it too late? It's never too late in any project to make huge changes.
I'm not advocating for it, I'm
But-
just wondering
And neither am I, I'm just,
But-
I'm hearing.
But
I
there
think
is
that-
and maybe to Craig's comment about agenda, there is a process here we should undertake
Correct.
and complete, which is the design development of this space as we've presented it. And if we want the team to start investigating additional design solutions, whether it is even just a library or rental space or whatever that is, that's a whole separate stream that should bring, I think, as a steering committee to approval, and then to council to say, we would like to investigate this alternative design process as part of the project process. So I'm trying to stay on process
And
here.
not to, like, going down this path that we're going down right now, this path ends at gate 3 approval. Like, design development report, let's get this section done.
Yeah.
That's a design process that has a certain cost to it, but that is peanuts compared to pulling the
A
trigger
redesign.
on a $10 million project that makes no sense. So, you should feel comfortable with carrying through this design process, understanding exactly what this looks like, because
DD is
we
a
talked
great
about it,
stage to
and this
draw a line
approval,
in the
like,
sand.
we are approved to go to gate 3 and do all this work for this building because we were told to. So, we should definitely do that, but I would absolutely recommend that in the meantime, before we get to gate 3, everybody does some homework to say, is this a project worth pursuing beyond gate 3? Because
And let's look
if
at
we're
part
still
of that-
talking about project viability and we're like halfway through design development, then there's obviously something there to talk about.
And part
So
of
the
that
other-
consideration needs to be schedule, not just cost, right? Like to redo
Oh,
his
yeah.
process. is gonna be time
But
consuming.
the
Allison,
other issue
we'll be quicker next time.
is the community is not saying, they're saying, why is Meeting Hall in here? We want this for community recreation, extra space. So the community doesn't realize that if Meeting Hall is there, we're not building 10,000 square feet, we're only building 7.
That's not what I'm hearing. And that's not what, you know, the mayor has been,
So you're hearing that they would like only a 7,000 or 6,000 square foot building
Yes.
and only community center? Because
Correct.
what I was hearing from the rec commission comments was they want 10,000 square feet, all
Yeah.
community center.
you know, the mayor has been passionately lukewarm about the whole community center. And
But
And
he's
his-
not gonna be
No, but-
passionately warm about a community center,
No,
period.
yeah, no, he is. That, his issue from the beginning has been the inclusion of municipal offices.
Well, he hasn't articulated
Well,
that
no,
very well
sometimes
to
he
the general
doesn't
counsel.
articulate it well, but
Okay, Jackie?
Yeah, I just want to speak to the whole concept of the process and where we're at. So what my concern is, we are working towards getting together this case for support.
Yeah.
We've just kind of blown that out of the water. And so now if we look at our timeline for fundraising for the referendum, I mean, it's all up in the air now. Because if we are losing our argument about the cost of building the municipal hall, now that was, to me,
that was the
key
primary. yeah.
to that argument and building that case for support. So we're abandoning that. I mean, that's gonna really put a wrench in everything, so.
Although it's only
that's my
contributing
concern.
the portion of potentially, and maybe more, if you look at it more broadly, the municipal hall portion, it is that Kickstarter to what this is, right? So from a,
That's what we were looking at, yeah.
from a project initiation perspective, if you don't have something to start with, then we're starting with zero.
Square one.
No, and it's
But we do
difficult to change at this point. I just want to say that if we go back, I mean, we've been talking about a community center for, decades, eons. So when it came up that the municipal hall would be attached, initially people were questioning why. We have a municipal hall, we need a community center. And my conversations explaining why we needed that municipal hall to be part of the project, people got that initially. I mean, I hear you guys are hearing other things, but the community that I've been speaking to, they understood that. And
Mhm.
but that was based on, again, this argument for capital, the benefits
Efficiencies.
and what it's bringing in to the benefit for the capital costs. So now I'm very concerned if we don't have that.
What is the implication of, or is it even possible to, here's our project with the community hall, here's what the cost is, and this is what the community hall pays for itself. Here's a project with community center, some other space. You community are paying for all of this because this is,
Your
if it's a
amenities.
library, whatever concept we decide on. And when you go to referendum, you present both of those options, and your third option is do nothing.
Well,
And-
Kathy says we
I
can
mean,
only
is
have
it
one
possible
question.
to do that in a referendum, is to
Well,
give them basically,
We would have to have a
Kiss it
parallel
up.
vote, because for the loan authorization bylaw, the legislation is very clear what the question has to be, borrow up to, and that's be yes or no. But there's something called a community opinion vote that we can do concurrently at the referendum, at the general election about, it's an opportunity, because it doesn't cost us any more during
Not a great success rate on
we only have one.
Wouldn't you want to do that like sooner rather than later
Well-
and not connected
And
to
not,
the?
because then you're
Like,
on
you
hold
want- you
until
want-
October.
later, yeah.
You don't want it to have to
Later.
do with the money as well. You want it to be a question of base project, like.
I think, we did have a meeting with the steering committee, and we decided to go ahead with the municipal offices intact. And I think part of the deal is we're going down this road, and I think there's some knee-jerk reactions going on either side, and some public comments and where they're coming from. Who knows what that group looks like, and how large it actually is. But I think we decided that we should stay the course, get through this, and I think it would be very opportune to have a big public meeting. And if that comes out of a public meeting, and we've got to sort of bring it out and see what the actual public is thinking. Because the last meeting we had was very supportive.
Well,
Having said that, it wasn't.
us raising the
huge
flag
amount.
about whether BIM should be in the building or not came out of that public meeting. That was when we decided that we would write something about it.
Yeah.
So
there was sufficient comments from the public for us to have a feeling we should, comment on it ourselves.
And they were all related to me.
So I would,
Aha!
No, I'm teasing.
but I personally think we should carry on, go down the road. And, but before gate 3, we're gonna have to go to, I think we're gonna have to go back to the public and see it, and, I don't know where we go from there.
Yeah,
It's
well,
a
more
philosophy,
importantly for me
it's-
than that is what Jackie's saying about that, what we have to address is the argument of the capital financing, and that was our motivation from day one to include municipal offices. And if that's not the case, then we've really undermined our main argument.
So and that figure is coming from you, Rod, you've run the figures now, and you think it's just,
Roughly, I'd have to go over the figures
We haven't
where
sat
they
together.
came from in terms of, and compare them, and where the conclusion was made that we were contributing to the community center. And it's possible I missed something.
Well, it is-
Raj, could I ask,
Yeah.
did I understand what you said was it's sort of a net
It's a neutral, yeah,
neutral, so you either stay here and rent and you pay
Yeah.
X, or you move there, you don't rent anymore, but you're paying X again.
yeah.
But what about the efficiencies of sharing janitorial services
Yeah.
and sharing this and sharing that?
I haven't addressed operating.
Because that,
costs.
to
Yeah.
my mind, is a lot more important than the actual capital.
Utilities
It's
and
gonna
all
cost X number of dollars to build a community center, whether it's here or in a square box, like some people would like. So,
There very well likely would be operational savings.
So may I just, I think when we get the energy utilities report, when we get a new QS report,
Mhm.
Raj and I spend a couple hours locked in a room together and analyze that based on the square footage of approximately 3,000 square feet, which is purely BIM, which excludes sort of those community rooms like the
Yeah.
council chambers and meeting rooms and reception areas. And then we actually come up with the data so that we have a good communication story right here wrongly if it undermines us or supports our case.
yeah, and then we are gonna lose, we're gonna lose all those common spaces.
No, we
That's
didn't
another
include
thing.
that in the 3,000
We
square
kept them in
feet.
there.
So the numbers where it was gonna
Oh, I
help
see.
to have Muni Hall all came from the finance committee back in 2014. And we went backwards and said, okay, we've got $3 million in reserve savings and reallocated funds. That'll fund 3 million, either the reserves or debt will pay for that.
Yeah,
And so we said, okay, $3 million at $450 a square foot, we'll build 6,667 square feet. We needed 3,000 square feet for municipal offices, so that left 3,667 square feet for communities. So that's how we came up with the fact that the municipal hall was gonna build 36. Then we said, okay, if we raise 500,000, then 3.5 million will build the same sort of thing. And if we manage to raise and get grant funding of 11 million, so we've got an 11,250,000 pot, then that was gonna build us 25,000 square feet at $450 a square feet. So part of the numbers changed because the cost per square foot is more than $450. But is that 450 for the construction, or is that for, what's the 450 to build the building without all the fancy retractable walls and all that other stuff? So anyhow, I can circulate this.
and the money we're leveraging, the $4.2 million, I mean, that's not just for it also includes a big part of the rec department.
Well, that was.
So how are we gonna
the-
fund that?
The
That's
$3
gonna have to be
million
funded separately.
we had that we said we had came from the reserves, the savings, like,
Okay.
replacing renting, and reallocated funds being using the rent monies to pay for the mortgage. I'll use mortgage even though it's a bond issue. But, yeah, so that was, so anyhow, that's sort of how we came up with the fact that.
So if we didn't have municipal hall in there, we're not gonna throw the $3 million at it,
That's
which is
right.
our lease terms.
Yeah.
What about that other 1.2 in reserves? We're gonna throw that at it?
Well, the reserves were for the communities, I mean, we.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we lumped all the
That does
reserves
go.
together. Well, there was still some money in the capital and stabilization fund at that point too. This was like four years ago, so almost 5 we did this, but, yeah. So anyhow, that was sort of how we did the rationale.
So I guess
They're
The
winning-
test will
sorry,
be,
Can I just add one thing before we move on? Just in terms of that, the financial efficiencies is you would be you wouldn't have as much leverage because we wouldn't be renting the children's centers, like all the rec spaces. That rent would not be a piece of what would be left if we all
That's
came
fair.
out.
Yeah, you would have to separate them.
We would have to separate from that as well in terms of that debt leveraging.
So it would just be
because
actually this building.
It would just be this building.
and just to throw other things in the mix, when we're doing the calculation of, well, what's the municipal hall component of the project? It's not just square footage building space. It is a portion of the mechanical system. It's a portion of the
Right.
parking.
Yeah.
It's also what we haven't got to, which is backup power, which
Well,
is,
and these are all capital costs.
yeah,
Right.
You know, that's where the efficiencies are in the capital costs. It's not the size of the building's gonna be the same anyway.
I think we also have to be careful as well. I think maybe we do need to go, just stick to the course, because if we start to talk about pulling muni offices out,
Then
And do we-
we're done.
do we then start to talk about pulling out the rec facilities, you know? Then does that lead us down that some people are gonna say, do we pull out the art component?
Just leave the living room.
Maybe we could
Well,
just,
yeah,
it
well,
sounds like,
it
it
seemed to be
sounds
a
like
bit
sidetracked.
coffee
There's enough
bar.
conversation that we need a
Coffee
separate
bar.
discussion and meeting just on finances and just so we can get through the purposes of today's meeting.
Yeah.
We'll make a note that we're gonna get some cost reports, we're gonna get some operational data. Maybe we could get BIM to start consolidating the different operating costs associated with the existing conditions of renting different spaces so that we're able to take those off the reserves in 1.3 mortgage amount, language,
I noted.
and then we can move forward with just going through kind of the concept update of where we're at.
I just,
And
there
we
is,
need to have a separate discussion purely on the financial piece. Otherwise, we'll just talk about this and I don't have all my financial data here today. That's not what I came prepared with, sorry.
so back to the agenda.
So back to the agenda, where were we?
Consultant.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna jump
Structural,
to
mechanical?
additional.
Electrical?
We're not gonna even talk about those right now.
Good.
We're gonna jump to a few additional scope items to consider that we have talked about or incorporated already. And this is partly for information, partly for discussion, partly for approval to keep going with the idea. First one is waste collection. So at our last design working group meeting, we introduced some space inside the building and a dedicated sort of larger volume space outside the building where there would be secure, covered collection of garbage and recyclables. And so that is not something that we had included before, and it makes all the sense in the world to do it inside the building because we're looking for every square inch of space, and so we
Yeah.
want to locate those in particular places and make sure we have containers, and that's the kind of level of detail we're getting into. And outside the building, we're going to show an additional scope item, which would be probably a concrete or asphalt pad with some kind of enclosure and roof over top.
And a bin.
And bins, yeah.
And bins.
The bins are the
So we,
easy part at this point.
when you get into this stage of design development, the devil comes out into what you don't have. And
Yeah.
when we went through counting recycles and green waste and garbage, we needed additional space to store the pickup locations, not inside the building.
And the assumption is that there'll be small containers collected together in certain spots in the building, and those containers would be sort of owner-provided containers, and then there's some kind of collection service. We've got these areas out back. One of them would be for garbage and recyclables and that sort of thing, but this is the location on the site where that would probably be. Whoever comes to pick up would come pick up using the driveway and everything on site. Does that seem, can we just like say, yeah, we need that, obviously?
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we need that.
There are a number of things that need to be outside.
Okay, next item, outdoor covered area for any kind of activity related to the community center. What we decided was to include some kind of open air structure primarily for rec programming, but could be for just anybody to use whenever it's not being used for rec programming.
Child minding also.
And that would be somewhere in this courtyard area likely, so that it's accessible from rec. Might be used if there's a big event, like a wedding event or something like that. And we're talking about 16 by 20 or some kind of usable size. Like it's not just a little bus shelter. You gotta have, what did we say, 12 people in a yoga class out there underneath, so.
So, and our feeling was that that would be a freestanding covered area as opposed to something connected directly to the building.
So you don't
For all
want-
sorts of reasons, we don't want to connect it to the building itself, because the building itself has its own kind of performance requirements. This would be far more value for the dollar to have it be a freestanding element. It also might just help
So to
define
be
that
clear,
landscape area.
the design team would need additional funds to design it, and it's gonna increase capital costs. It's about 1/3 of that side of the facility in that courtyard area,
Yeah, actually.
and it would be a covered structure. Is this something that the steering committee wants included in the project?
Certainly
Again,
should put it on the wish list, but-
let's just, like, when we talk about process, this has been Sam's reminder to me, is that, like, don't freak out about all the work we're doing right now. Do the good work right now, and then when we get to the, like, gate approval, that's when you have to be able to defend it and decide whether it's worthwhile to carry on with or to drop. So I would recommend that we include it, because it makes all the sense in the world. If it ends up being that the project's
It
$2
was
million over budget and everybody says forget it, then we can go through a process of saying,
value engineering or a scope laddering these items out at the time of construction.
Because it's something that is completely separate from the building, that it can be added in later.
But if it's not designed now, we'll never know the cost, we'll never be able to validate that decision-making process.
And it's just gonna say increases functionality of the whole space, so,
Yeah.
we've constantly been talking about it
It's
too, but we
amazing,
never.
amazing
Yeah,
square
we've been talking,
footage, yeah.
and what is the cost, right? So it's probably not, can't be significant, and
It wouldn't be, not in terms of design, and in terms of construction as part of the overall project, it's not a.
it's gotta be.
It doesn't have
right,
the
so-
other
Yeah.
infrastructure that adds high costs,
Yeah.
right? It's a roof and open timber
Oh,
structure.
definitely.
Good? Yes.
We're
We'll
getting
carry
nods.
on with that?
I think some nods.
I'm in.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody have
It
any
would be highly
objections to it?
used
You
by
would- they would,
recreation.
yeah.
Huh?
Recreation would use it.
Yeah.
So, and,
I saw
All
the
kinds of
outdoor
programs.
ping pong tables at Coquitlam
Oh,
last
yeah.
weekend, but they're not undercover, they were just out in the open.
Right, are they cement?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
actually have them in West Vancouver too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So I just take a
sections
picture
and-
with my phone so I can send it.
the next interrelated issue is around backup power. So one thing that we have learned about the water system is that every year that giant pipe on Bowen Trunk Road gets flushed for like a week in order to clean the pipe or something.
Weekend.
And during that period, there would not be sufficient water pressure to operate fire sprinkler systems. And so,
Twice a year.
that was twice a year.
October and April.
Okay,
Even if there is 10 minutes when there is insufficient water pressure to the building.
Yeah, absolutely.
so basically, it means that you need to have a booster pump for your fire sprinkler system. And if you need a booster pump for your fire sprinkler system, you need backup power. And we've talked about backup power for the muni offices already, so in some cases, it's almost like a synergy. It's like, well, we got a generator already, we'll just size it for both.
Kathy, what's happening with the generator out here?
I think it's beginning at any day. I haven't checked.
So we
It's
should-
not out
we
there
should-
right now.
You purchased it?
Yeah, we did.
How big is it?
Oh, it's small.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
So let's not even
Not big
talk
enough,
about
it's
it.
not
What we
really big
really need
enough.
is something bigger.
I know.
Yeah,
So-
this won't even.
We're
yeah,
gonna have to
still-
power this for a whole bunch of
The
reasons.
pump, according to the engineers, is about 80 kilowatts.
Just the fire pump itself.
just the pump. So the backup needs to do that, and then do other
Plus
things at the
whatever.
same time.
So there is an exercise that has been started with the mechanical consultant and the electrical consultant in order to understand the fire sprinkler requirements, the backup power requirements, how the building would be wired in order to have emergency systems on backup power and some BIM
Yeah.
components on backup power in order to maintain operation. And then going through the process of sizing the generator, sizing the propane that we would use as the fuel source for the generator, and that sort of thing. The question for today is, number one, where would all that stuff be? And we would recommend that it be backyard, potentially centrally located once we expand. We'll talk about that later. I'm just kidding.
No.
Or not.
Backup power. So this would be an area where there would be a generator sitting outside, pad mounted on concrete. There would likely be nearby a propane storage tank that could be filled from the driveway. It would be secured, that kind of thing, but that is a little complex of building elements out in the landscape that we believe should be located in this design development.
And fence.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah, I
So
would
that's
say
the
that's
first
pretty,
thing.
like it down here underneath here, but it's
The
just.
propane.
So,
truck
yeah,
coming together.
we had talked about, because all of our main services that are coming from Bowen Trunk Road are coming into the basement area, which is right here.
Correct, yeah.
We had actually, there's even a remnant of it. We had talked about having some of that equipment on this side, but as you can see, this is a steep slope, and what you'd end up doing is clearing all the trees, making a retaining wall, having
Yeah.
a bunch of equipment sitting right facing the street. And so,
It's
And then
not
you'd have to
successful.
create access for refilling or maintenance.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
it makes all the sense in the world to have this be a bit of a backyard area where some of these things can land and
Okay.
be, as long as we start including them now, they could be sort of composed as, you know, some sort of architectural treatment to tie them together. So as long as the location's fine, the next
Yeah.
question, location's fine?
I
Yes,
think we have many options.
correct.
So what
Um,
is sizing on the generator?
So-
130.
130K?
At the moment, yeah, the moment, it's gonna take a bit of back and forth with mechanical and electrical to understand what the sizing includes and
What's on backup power?
what's on backup power, what's not, and how much. And so the question really is, we wanna confirm our assumptions about backup power. What is included on backup power and for how long? And that will help us determine the size of fuel storage and of the generator itself. So our assumption is that emergency lighting will be on backup power for the whole building, because it would be a code requirement if the building's occupied. The fire pump would be on backup power because it has to be on backup power.
Limited mechanical.
Limited mechanical on backup power because we had talked about having the municipal offices be operational. And the question is whether we include just lighting and plug loads or whether we include heating and conditioning.
We've assumed at the moment lighting and plug loads just for the municipal offices.
And no heat.
So you'd have your computers and your lights and your server,
And your warm jacket.
and your warm jacket, and so no heat. And I would recommend that's probably the best assumption to go with at this point.
It's the lowest cost assumption, and it's assuming that, you know, you're not in that condition for long.
We're also,
So most, even in post-disaster buildings, they allow 72 hours of.
Yeah.
which is what we've been
Which is probably
assuming,
what
72 hours, so 3
we assume
days.
here, but I'm assuming your power isn't out for 3 days very often.
Well, see, okay, and then the bigger question is, how long do you want backup power?
I think the main thing is to make sure that the server's up and running, because if the server's going, people can still work from home, so that they're still being done.
Well, unless they don't have power at home. One of our issues that we currently have, and knock on wood, it's been a while since we've had a long power outage, but we definitely get them, is we have to, if it's cold, we have to send our municipal employees home.
Yeah, WCB.
Even if, yeah, it's just a fact, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
in
the
which
question
case
is,
you'd
do
be
we want
talking
to
about
keep-
condition, minimally conditioned, well, conditioned BIM office.
Yeah,
Okay.
Which will increase the loads to the generator, which
Yeah.
means potentially much larger, even larger unit.
But it's, at this point, our exercise isn't really to push against it. It's to understand what's the design requirement. We will design it, and then if it is astronomical, then we can adjust it. But
Again,
there's no
incrementally reduce it.
reason to second guess it at this point.
I mean, and then going back to the fire pump, the trigger there with the water flows not being great enough when they're doing their testing, there's a bunch of decision making there about, you know, assuming that there's no change to the water flow or that the water becomes more stable in the future, so that if there is an upstream issue or a fire hydrant open, that there's still water flow coming through to the building. So we're trying to mitigate those risks so it can at least be a self-sufficient standalone building.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, conditioned lighting and plugs for BIM, and for how long? That,
72 hours? same
Yeah.
as the-
Yeah, I
so-
think that's where we have to go.
so with that criteria, then we will come back with
Sizes.
design and the size of the storage for the propane and the size for the generator. The other thing that we're using in terms of the mechanical system is, for efficiency, we're using an air source heat pump. So that uses power in order to draw heat out of the air and use it in the building in a super efficient way. It's a great technology, very efficient, but when it gets really cold, like minus whatever, -5 is really cold to me, but
It said we were
If
told
it's-
we were told -2 and below, then the backup.
-2 and below, so in which case it gets harder to pull heat out of the air because it's cold air, and so there needs to be a backup source of power or fuel, and so propane would be used in order to provide a backup for the heating system, for the boilers. And so we'd be sizing the propane volume for the backup generator load plus some backup mechanical heating load. So just for information.
So it means we have a propane tank in the rear yard as well.
Yeah.
Of
And hot
a-
water and things for the showers, how's that going to
The
be?
showers will not be operational when there's a power outage.
No.
Well, if you're the first one.
Day-to-day.
Yeah, that's right.
I talk about the ongoing operating of hot water tanks, will they be operated? they be
So hot
propane?
water tanks, what happens is it's a central water plant, which means that it takes heat out of the air and puts it into water.
Okay, so
And
it's.
so that water is used to heat up like hot water for showers. It's also used to go through the air handling units in order to heat up the air.
Raj, you had something?
I just had a quick question. The level 3 or step
Step
level 3 or whatever, I'm not familiar with those, but does that qualify for this to be a post-disaster building, or is this building gonna be a post-disaster building?
It's not going to be a post-disaster building. There's
The one
certain,
down, right? High importance or something?
It's designed structurally as a high importance building, and so it's designed to a higher structural requirement, so that the assumption is after an earthquake,
Yeah.
you can occupy it, rather than it will stand for long enough that you can get out. So that's
But the
that's
other
the
systems are
criteria
not-
for.
So it could be structural afterwards.
our emergency operations center is going to be located in the new fire.
But it's not post-disaster.
It's not, okay.
But we could use it as a reception center if we needed to.
Yes.
Yeah,
You need
especially if you invite everybody into the BIM offices, which should be warm, because it is.
The only warm place on the
So, okay.
So,
propane
sorry,
storage.
just going about, would it only be the BIM offices that would be heated then with that backup?
Correct.
Correct.
So the way that the building is designed currently, we didn't get into the detail of mechanical and structural sort of assumptions so far, because it seems like we have other things to talk about, but,
Is it possible to be able to have certain parts of the community center heated
I'm just thinking maybe the common living room or something.
We'd have to.
There's
You're
essentially
getting the
three
whole-
components to the mechanical system for heat. One is the BIM offices. The other is the theater. And then there is another air handling unit for all of the other areas.
Everything else, yeah.
Okay, this sounds really stupid. Well, it does, yeah, it does. But years ago, my vision of our living room was this idea of having a wood stove with a rocking chair beside it. Is that doing something where we have that alternative heat in
We have
the
the
living room
fireplace.
area?
We got a
It's
fireplace.
it's actually one of our questions today, because we were talking about it. We do have a fireplace and a
Yeah.
location for it, and you could have a rocking chair. Or just at owner's
Every month from
expense.
Bring your own.
An owner's
Um,
expense, yeah.
But the question around the fireplace is, what is an appropriate fireplace for community center?
Propane or wood?
Propane or wood or electric or whatever.
Propane.
I just think this idea of here on
It's
board,
a-
because of our power outages, having that alternative heat source, and not so much even a fireplace, but a airtight wood stove. I mean,
Either one, it's absolutely why it's a question for us,
Yeah.
because we said, well, there's no way that they would want to have a wood-burning fireplace at a community center. But, I don't know, if you do, it's Bowen Island, it's, could be actually really nice.
Whose job description is gonna be still.
Chopping the wood.
Chopping the wood.
I think
Got lots of trees around there.
Propane fire just to take logs is much more practical.
I think I have to agree on that one.
yeah.
And we won't have
This is just
anybody
my
complaining about particulate
romantic
matter
version
emissions.
of the community
I
center.
Did you have dual fuel?
Do you think we have to have a discussion about whether or not we have a place where it's heated during a power outage for the community? Because right now, power's out in the morning, you go to the snug, and that's really it. So
Right.
having an opportunity, like a place for families to come and keep warm during the day, I think it could go down really badly if the BIM offices are
Warm.
Yet, on the other side.
And they're surfing the internet because they got
Their
like,
faces pressed against the glass.
And then you have families
Exactly.
coming in because, you know, the house is cold and like, I think that would be a nice amenity of the community
I
center.
think
To
you'd
sort
go
of
to the
say, this
big
is a
gym.
place to come during, you know, long.
so here's the spectrum, right? It's the wood-burning fireplace seems a bit extreme because it's just a lot of maintenance and cleaning.
Environmentally and not this place either, right?
Exactly.
It's like
The,
romantic vision.
the electric, like cosmetic kind of fireplace just seems like it does not belong.
No.
And so, propane fireplace, as long as the risk around kids sticking their hands on it is mitigated, and as long as it's designed to operate in power outage, sounds like it's probably the best fit.
Would that give enough warmth though to say the community living room?
No.
If you get close enough to it, it would.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're,
It's not a huge building, so I
There
don't know if you cranked it
are
up.
more
even.
and less efficient gas fireplaces. Some are just cosmetic and some actually produce heat.
I just want to say, I think I would be in favor though to having emergency heating in one part of the community center.
I think they can do that with Dawson's working.
So that would become a thing in terms of when we would advertise or make that available to people for outages?
It's a gathering space. I mean, I
Well,
think.
it's a public building, they're gonna come.
So at this point, we're just doing design, so how about we just say it's propane, it'll work when there's no power, and work on the operational part of it later.
but I think what Melanie's saying is the base systems infrastructure, not just the fireplace.
Yeah.
If we need to dedicate another air handling unit to provide heat to another part of the building during a power outage, is that what you're asking?
I think so, so you could have
Oh,
a
you
warm
probably
gap.
you probably don't understand, because we haven't described it, the overall heating strategy for the building.
So
But
you've
the-
explained that there's three. There's,
That's right.
yeah, so you'd have one for the muni side.
Yep.
You'd have one for the,
Primarily
art
for the
space.
large multi-purpose room
We
and
don't want to have
adjacent,
empty here.
and then one for
So-
the back area.
There's one right here, which is actually in a mezzanine space above the washrooms, because we have the height for it. And that, you can see, serves all these spaces, rec,
yeah,
Yeah.
multipurpose, that whole zone.
Community living.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's an air handling unit that is down in the basement and snurgles its way up into the BIM office. And so that
So can I
unit-
stall you there for a second?
Yep.
To answer your question, the council chambers will be heated as part of the municipal office space in those 72 hours.
There you go.
but also the one that does the rec and the multi-purpose space.
You're
It-
wanting
it's
that.
Currently, it's not, but
That's a
what you're
separate
asking
one.
for.
That would be turned off in a power outage.
And I'm asking for consideration that
Get turned on.
Uh-huh.
So there's a cost implication
I
in
understand.
that, obviously, right? So at the moment, we've got a 130 kilowatt generator, which is about 5 feet by 12 feet by 6 feet high, which is going to have a cost
Size of
of
this
roughly
TV.
$120,000. So there'll be a big sort of incremental step up to add another air handling unit to the overall heating. But
Yeah.
if that's a mandate that you want to have, we should include that because we need to tell mechanical, electrical we're doing it.
But if there's already an air handling unit that's gonna heat the large multi-purpose space, why wouldn't we just put people in there?
That's
But
that's
that's-
off also.
No, it's off.
That's
So
all.
at the moment, that
on
on,
instead.
What if that?
Oh,
if you were
If
gonna
not,
add
rather
one,
than
which one would
adding
you add?
another
Yeah,
one.
right.
Yeah, I would think it would be the larger space, but, and it's also wondering what the implications for managing it then.
If
Cause
I,
then we can't go home either.
Yeah, and you need to have staff on.
Okay, so
wait,
so that's it, the community center's closed in power outages.
What
That
happens
would
in
be-
West Vancouver in the community center if there's a power outage? Is it heated?
I think that's the thing, is that this isn't really a design criteria typically. So it's not as if people are planning for power outages all the time. Like,
Well, we,
if you're a hospital, that's one thing, but then you're post-disaster, you're all redundant, everything. But
I
we're
think we
getting
also
caught
have
in
to-
this zone
Minutia.
between, between a building, which is really just a building, and when the power is out, there's no
So-
power. And a post-disaster facility where everybody flocks to that building because it's like the only place going. So,
I don't know, and I think we have to stay in context that we're on Bowen Island, and are people really gonna flock to a community center when the power's out?
That is something that people ask for now, is where can I go? My house has been cold for a day now, and
People don't have wind strokes anymore? I'm just so surprised.
if we make a decision that it's gonna be closed during power outage, fine, I'm just raising it for discussion.
I think,
I see that.
I mean, from a cost perspective, I'm trying to control the,
okay, can I ask a question about emergency management? Like, the power would go.
yeah,
The chances of a power outage affecting the community center means the main line to the island has to be out. Because it's all underground to there.
Yeah.
or
it's overhead right now,
some,
up
you know,
Bowen Trunk Road.
Well,
they
no,
put the
they
underground
buried it
last year.
this summer, that's why the road's all dug up.
Those poles are not there?
Those are for the telephone
Well,
wires.
no, actually, there's power there too.
Okay, but my understanding is that what Hydro was doing last summer and why they dug up the
It
road.
wasn't quite that also. The power for this building will come from the pole, which is currently in the sort of driveway that goes onto the soccer field. And
Yeah.
that pole, there's sufficient power, electrical consultants been speaking with Hydro. That's how our power's coming to the building.
Because why did they dig the road up?
It has to do with servicing the island generally, and it doesn't deal directly with this building. That power line that's coming out.
Because one of the questions I asked when they were doing all that was they were running the power up the road, and I said, I do hope that means that the community center can be serviced from the underground that you're putting in. And I thought the answer I got when I asked
That's
Who
what
did
I
you ask?
understood as
was
well.
Public Works, and Kathy did the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
that's not what our
But
engineers
me-
do,
Well, he might not know about it.
but we
May-
should, we'll.
Yeah, because I mean, that's important that that still be the underground power, because then we're not dealing with any of the sort of, the rest of the islands out, because the trees wiped out the main line.
We had a
across the
power
island.
outage last year where the source was on the other side.
West Vancouver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
that's they're, you know,
Let's,
that's.
but
we-
it-
we've got to sort of cut this down, looking at the
Okay, but
time and
then the
stuff like
next
that.
question was, if there is one of those power outages because of an earthquake or something, I'm going back to finding that email thread from Jen when she was asking from the Emergency Management Committee.
Yeah.
So is there any plans, if there was an earthquake or something like that, a major disaster, to use this building other than have the municipal operations?
I
I
don't
thought she was
think,
talking about using it for a reception center.
no, I don't think there is. But that's something we should check with
But
Jen.
that needs to be, I've got this thread, remember that
But,
thread?
but Melody's point
Yeah.
is different. I like,
So
it's
I'd like it, what I was trying to get to is, just like we've discussed with the covered area, there's, you're planning to cost that out, and depending on the
Yeah.
cost, it will either make it in or not. And so
Yeah.
what I'm asking is, can we do the same for an additional heated space in the community center? Not the
Yeah.
whole thing, just pick one of the additional,
It may actually be the simplest calculation to have. It's like, how much bigger does a generator need to be in order to add this air
That's all I'm
value?
asking, because I just
Totally.
think
And so is
I get
it
it.
the,
Could be
is it
a
the
need.
large multi-purpose performing arts space or the
whatever's the
community
cheapest
center?
bit, so
I
that
think
there
the
is a
best thing
place
to
where
do
you
would
could
be
go
the-
and have.
I think you'd have more
But
capacity.
just
more
what I was trying
responsibility.
to get at was if the power's underground and it's gonna feed it, it's not except for,
Earthquake.
We're not gonna be able to
where
power.
the power's never gonna be out of
We
it.
were
So it'll
last
be
year.
open.
It happens. We were last year. and-
Yeah, there's switches over West End.
Because of the
Yeah,
switch.
that's right, they came in.
Yeah, right.
So I guess unless
We
they
can fit it
fix
in
that
for cost
problem, which I
increase.
thought they
Help
were.
make the decision.
But I agree,
Yeah.
I agree with Melanie, because from a perspective of the community, and it's not using it as a reception center, yeah, if we have our power up for whatever reasons for 3-4 days, I'm gonna feel really bad sitting in a heated municipal office, watching all these poor little kids in another section, and that could sway a few people with a vote, you know, for
And this
the
is a
vote.
rural community that
Yeah.
is known for power outages. I'm sorry, for me, I thought that would have just been inherent, that we would have had a heated space. Not the whole thing, but somewhere that was above.
Oh, let's put it on the wish list.
Yeah.
I mean, but then that will have implications on your operations too, because then you need to be prepared. If we're saying that's available anytime the power's out, you've gotta have
We have to
people there and
staff
you
it.
have to have staff.
Well, I don't know if it's telling people that, it's just people will show up, right?
Right, but
But
I'm
you
still
could
saying, you
also
still
have it,
have to
you
have
could
all
have
that
it
in place.
controlled.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
You
mean, if
could
we're
say the
open-
community center is gonna be open today between
between these hours.
Yeah,
12 and 4 as a place to come and warm up and play.
yeah.
You know, and you can make it that.
Yeah, especially if our municipal offices are functioning, and that would be an extraordinary circumstance, right? Situations like that, and I would certainly commandeer staff to assist if we were having those sorts
So
of.
on that one, I think the better unit to heat up is the one on the left side.
Yeah.
Because if your car's out for 3 days at home, you might want to have a shower.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I sure would.
It's a different
Nice.
system.
I think you actually are heating far more space with that unit than you're heating if you were like huddling everybody together in one single room. I think
Can we
it'd
leave it to
feel
your
like a-
judgment where you
Yeah.
think it might be most appropriate? And
Yeah.
if it comes out, It's $1 million to
Community
add
living room
this,
space,
then we
'cause you
know
have
it's
that
a lot.
And then we can
multi-purpose room
justify
that has
that.
a few other amenities like
Yeah.
water.
The coffee shop would be open too, so you could get.
Better be.
Okay,
Well, it's not as good
Yeah.
First one.
Oh, priorities here.
Oh, my goodness.
So just a point of clarification before we leave this, because Allison just said, and the coffee shop will be open too. So do you also want to have power operational in that part of the building, or just heat?
Oh, I just assumed you were.
I think
saying
just-
No, they're not the same thing. The
No, they're not.
air handling units and the heating units are in the basement or up on the roof. We deliver power to them, and they will provide heat to the spaces.
Got you.
We are,
We got
we are
emergency
making the
lighting,
plugs in the BIM
Yes.
thing
Yeah.
live.
Through a,
The BIM offices will have live plugs in a power
So
outage.
someone can go and.
Make
So you
coffee
can-
in the municipal
Yeah.
kitchen.
Yes, but the
Yeah.
other receptacles will not be live.
Okay.
Neither will the
But
light.
we can open up the BIM kitchen
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Community
This is-
kitchen.
If you want to
Yeah.
open the
Community
kitchen, then you need to have power in the kitchen.
no, like
No, there's
essentially,
municipal-
Kitchens in the municipal
kitchen.
Oh,
offices.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
and we
Good
could,
point.
as part of the BIM thing, have a power to the meeting rooms, which could be set up as community
Yeah.
spaces, so.
Yeah.
That, I think
and we
is,
won't have any of that if we don't have
So
municipal
no
hall.
power. distribution.
yeah,
There you go, Gary.
okay,
Yeah.
can I, next one?
Sir, yes, please.
We had talked about theatrical lighting, pipe grid, sound system, projection, all that for the theater space. At the moment, not all of that is currently in the scope of the electrical consultant, and what we had proposed perhaps would be to have another consultant come on board to help us map all that out. Then when we talked about it with the design working group, we decided that because of the size of the project, it might actually lend itself better to being kind of a vendor-led. You go to somebody who's a supplier, they give you a bit of free design assistance, you develop a package of equipment, that kind of thing.
Kind of like the furniture.
Kind of like the furniture. And I just wanted to ask,
I think
mostly you, to
The-
say,
The question we talked about is how do we want to integrate the theater AV components into this design? Do we want the contractor to do them, or do we want to have it as a separate layered on package afterwards?
From a fundraising perspective and separating out costs, I like the separate package, and I think you'd get better technical expertise.
And the real question is, are we gonna include this in the design development, or are we gonna throw an allowance at it for later? Ultimately, we'd love to integrate it with the design, but in that particular room, it's not that big a deal. It's gonna be sort of a,
However
you're gonna paint it out ceiling, all of that stuff's gonna go up there, you're not gonna really know about it anyway. So if we had to, we could just put a dollar amount to it and not coordinate it.
Did we not have some people who were,
Yes, I
could be
think,
involved?
yeah, you have already been connected with the people that we knew that were involved in terms of consulting with them at that level, but I think
Yeah.
this is the next step.
This is the next
This is
step,
actually
is
pretty-
now do we bring in a professional as part of the principal's team, so that we can integrate those design requirements now, and they're part of the design package, or do we do it as a vendor-led installation? Once we've got design development complete, we provide that information to
And put a-
design builder,
Put
supplier.
a budget to it now, so that there's an
Yeah.
allowance in the design development report, but not specify all the equipment and the layout and that kind of
Is
thing.
that not your call, Sam? I mean, what's your recommendation on that?
I was thinking a separate layered
Separate,
package.
yeah,
Yeah.
After DD, and we make an allowance for it
Yeah,
now.
okay.
That allowance might not be the right number, but it's something we can work towards.
Just gotta make sure
Okay.
you get the power in the right places.
That's all I wanted to hear. It's
Yeah.
after DD, and we will put it, it'll be in the room data sheets,
Yeah.
but it'll be vendor-led or whatever it is.
Okay.
The next question is acoustic consultant. From our contractual point of view, we are coordinating, but we're not engaging, and so we would like to get into that before DD is over. So if, Sam, maybe I'll follow up with you about acoustic.
And that's something that really needs to be done at the time you're doing the install.
I think we need that for
because
DD,
It's
yeah.
more expensive to do it afterwards, or decide how you're gonna do it first.
Yep,
Should be
and,
integrated into the design. If you have a large space like the large multi-purpose room, you basically need to treat the whole floor or the whole ceiling or some combination of floors, ceilings and wall or whatever. And that needs to be kind of tied into the design. So,
Please do it during design, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Do that at Coke
Yeah.
Commons and
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it also, it can, there's a couple of things we can do with building geometry in order to help acoustics, as long as we do it now rather
Yeah.
than after the fact. Okay, I got a couple quick questions probably. Electrical metering, we talked about. We're assuming that the whole building will be on one meter. There's no need to separate out the building use from the community
How is
or
it,
the,
how much in the contract?
or the
Okay.
coffee shop.
Contract, yeah.
Like the coffee shop is not a tenant space. It doesn't need to be measured. This is a community center.
Hydro
It's a
will
whole
only,
building.
Hydro will bring only one service to the building. So they're not gonna bring two services. So the
I
Hydro service.
understand that, but it could be
But
split
you
there.
can put it
It
in
can-
the,
can, yeah.
right?
You can, if there was some kind of arrangement that needed to be accounted for, we need to include it so that the electrical system can be designed that way and then can be measured on either
Separate.
side.
You don't have that
We
in your
talked
letter of
about-
understanding, the split between,
We
IAC
did
and
talk, it's not in the memo, it's not in
We
my
didn't get to that
understanding,
meeting.
but
Any of those operating costs.
But in terms of operating costs, when we're figuring out how much we would rent the large
Yeah.
multipurpose space for a wedding or something that isn't our programming,
It would be helpful,
it would be
I
helpful.
think, to be.
But
Well,
when you're talking about that, you're talking about operating
I'm talking about
costs.
operating costs.
That's different because it
You
includes heat.
can't, no, so, but your question about metering is whole building and then metering of panels? I'm
Yeah.
not clear.
Exactly.
So you're saying-
It was mostly around the BIM offices because we've treated them architecturally so separately. The question was, oh, do those need like a separate meter? Are they renting that space or whatever? And we kind of like,
We don't.
it's one building. Like, I don't see there any reason why we would separate out the electrical use among functions of the building. But
As long as it
That was
can be
my
trapped
answer.
in the
It will-
BMS system, can't it, is there not gonna be a management system that includes the electrical and mechanical systems? Are we, we haven't got
DVC?
there yet, yeah, like a DVC.
digital control thing?
Yeah,
Uh,
can plug loads be monitored without extra metering?
It wouldn't be metering, so maybe that's the wrong term, but like data logging for
Monitoring.
use, like monitoring.
So then I would say, yeah, we'd probably need separate monitoring for spaces from an energy management perspectives and an operations. I mean,
Okay,
that's
okay.
pretty common and
Yeah, I would think
community
so.
center
So
buildings.
separate
yeah.
monitoring.
And would there be separate heat, like thermostats in each room? Can you
Oh, yeah,
control
yeah,
the
that-
heat
yeah.
separately?
Yeah,
in
and that's
each
partly
room?
why it's been zoned the way it's been zoned.
Three
is-
different zones, is
Yeah.
that what it would?
And you can even see, like, from a rec point of view, like, this zone is different from this zone.
Okay.
Because there's very different needs in those two different rooms.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
Another quick one.
Can we go back to the monitoring and have the electrical consultant make a proposal for us to review, even if it's a simple breakdown, like, so we're,
Yeah, I think it
are we
would
talking
be,
about 50 zones or 5?
I think it'd be electrical and mechanical because it'd be DVC and power, like for controls.
And would you see the coffee shop being one of those monitor items?
No, it's too small, I would say.
I'm seeing it more programmatically myself, but, I mean, I see.
I'm
kind
only
of-
asking because if that
Ooh, I like
ends
that
up
word.
becoming, if that ends up becoming a tenant space down the road, you might want to.
You might wanna charge them for.
So, but
electric.
what I mean is, so
Yeah,
you have
you
your
charge
rec
them flat
component,
fee.
then you have your small multi-purpose room component, then you have your large multi-purpose room component, then you have your BIM offices, like, those are sort of the major.
And the theater.
Yeah, that's the
Large,
large
large,
multi-purpose
large.
theater area.
Oh, sorry, the living room. Yeah, okay.
So that's how I kind of see the monitoring, but I'm not the operator,
Bigger chunks.
yeah, bigger chunks.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, and then for smaller purposes, you can just, like, do allocations and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, does that kind of monitoring
Consumption.
get buy-in for
You-
sustainability and
Yeah,
energy
Yeah.
conservation and stuff like that?
if you have to
When
hit
we're
certain
going for
criteria,
grants
then
and- yeah,
the
you know,
nuances
We
of
can say, yeah, we're gonna,
lead, you have to.
that person that leaves their heat on at night
Monitor.
can get a note from the computer saying, you left your heat on.
But the coffee shop is not a tenant space, correct?
So at this point-
Well, it might be in the future, so it's easy to, if you're putting a monitoring thing in, and it's easy to add one more versus down the, I don't know how hard or easy it is to monitor the different areas.
Like power consumption only.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about heat, because they're sort of heated as part of the general thing.
Point of sale will happen at reception.
Correct.
At one point, we had talked about point of sale being in the rec area, but is there really a need for that?
No,
Can we-
not if we have
Not if we
our
have-
own reception.
Yeah.
Okay. So point of sale will just be at reception?
So
Yeah.
point of
At
sale
BIM
will
and
need
at-
to be at both
Both
receptions.
receptions.
Yes,
Yes,
Yeah,
so point of sale will be at both receptions.
yeah.
yeah.
Is there
Um,
any point of sale at the coffee shop?
I would think
Yeah.
there would be.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah.
Good point. I didn't even think of it. Yeah.
And if it
And
were
those are all
separate-
tied into the main server, or how's that working?
Yeah.
So, and then we had a assumption around just security.
Do you want
The server and files for BIM would be on the BIM side of the building,
Correct,
accessible only from BIM.
Yeah.
correct.
However, the communications, internet, Wi-Fi equipment might be accessible from the community center side in a service room.
Could be in there.
In case the, BIM's closed and the community center reception person needs to go reset the whatever, that there would be, there's a differentiation between server and files for BIM, which needs security, versus internet and Wi-Fi community.
We're only building one communications closet.
Well, I'm just thinking that there may be a reason to separate them because you don't necessarily want community
Why was
staff
it?
access to the BIM office server.
Well, I think, maybe speaking
easy
from
enough to
lessons
do.
learned,
Yeah.
maybe only those going into the server room are those who need to go into a server room. It doesn't matter who they are, but I don't know
Yeah.
right now if any staff would be going into the server
Well, your
room.
facilities manager might have to.
Right,
Yeah.
and the IT,
Yeah, the only thing we were
Yeah.
thinking was the sort of community center, internet,
Splitting
whatever,
that.
whatever sort of
Interface.
user interface in order to reset things and then manage it might be on a,
I get that point, because
Their staff.
I mean, but Would we not also have, say, volunteers on the weekend manning
But
that
they
session?
probably wouldn't do that, right?
Yeah, but
They
if,
wouldn't want
if they,
that.
but
They
the
had to-
Wi-Fi, but that's Craig's point, right? If for whatever reasons, internet and Wi-Fi went down, those people on the weekend would not be able to access the server to reset.
It's a
They
very
can-
subtle
I think you
thing,
have to
but we
call
just
it-
wanted to differentiate the
Is there a
difference
cost
between
at that point?
having access to the BIM server room, which has
I think that should be
thousands.
separate.
That's
I
temporary.
think
So
it
two
is-
server rooms.
Well, or the same room and one's accessible from this side and one's accessible
Yeah.
from
So again, I would
the
say if that's a low cost, then I think
That's
we
a
should
very
definitely
no,
do
it's just
that.
a,
other. It's definitely low cost.
functional.
And it's also just a reminder that like, the community center component is actually a little bit different than the BIM, and so where there's places where they're not compatible, we wanna make sure our design recognizes that, we don't wanna introduce a problem where all of a sudden somebody's in the server room and disconnect something that they're not supposed to, because they're just trying to reset the.
So your point of sale equipment for the coffee shop
Mhm.
shouldn't be connected to the BIM server. I mean, if you've got an independent operator or volunteers running that point of sale equipment, you don't want some volunteer that's a good hacker to be able to hack in
Well,
using that.
Or just
I
screw
mean, the
things
point of
up.
sale thing
Or-
might actually be a
It's totally
cloud
separate,
service or
right?
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We use
Yeah.
Where
Where-
separate from the BIM. right?
But the point of sale
Or I'm just thinking
service
of the
for the,
Activent.
our program
Oh.
registration.
Yeah,
Right, that's
separate.
totally
That's
separate,
totally
so we'll
separate.
probably be using Activent.
Like we do now.
Yes.
Or squares.
Okay, we're getting there, couple
Good,
more,
good, go.
couple more. Hydro, the electrical consultant has made contact with Hydro around design for the building. For Hydro, what they need is for the client to pay this design fee in order to get the design to actually proceed. And what I would what we're suggesting is that happen after Gate 3's been approved, and that be part of the construction documents phase, and that we just make assumptions for Hydro.
We usually have a letter,
Yeah, and
that we
that's,
have to sign.
Yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
letter and engagement portion during this stage, so it's ready to go? Because
do you want, I guess the engagement part is a big bill, that's all.
I'm not paying the bill, I just want to get the process in place where BC Hydro's ready to send the bill and the letter for sign off as soon as possible, so those costs are clarified sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because even that process sometimes could take 2 months.
Exactly, and so I guess,
And so if we
It's
just
both
get
things.
them engaged to say, okay, what is your design gonna cost? Can we get to that point before Gate 3?
and you just basically don't sign it until Gate 3 is approved, and then you sign it the next day and you're off. Okay, that's a good idea. Okay, now the fun stuff.
Hopefully follow along.
Climbing wall,
Follow along.
skate park. Discuss.
Discuss.
We need
Approved.
something to distract people from the swimming pool
Distraction.
conversation.
It's like a swimming pool, it has no water in it. You can
Yeah.
skateboard in
I think we
it.
should put the climbing wall in the council chambers. Is there actual times
I
when
thought
we
we
climb
could
the
put it in
walls?
your office.
Skateboard through Duffy's.
I'm 100% on board for the skateboard park.
I wonder why.
But not, it can be somewhere in the lands around, it doesn't
Yeah, yeah,
have to be right, like, where's the ideal location for a skateboard park? Not right next door, because it's a bit noisy.
It's a bit noisy, but at the back end of that backstop.
Where's the map again?
Grass
Um,
field
Where's
or
the money coming?
where the municipal offices are.
I think they're all great ideas,
Yeah.
right? But these are all separate projects. This is
Yeah.
not
They are
the boundaries of our
separate projects.
charter or our
No,
project.
but
These
we
are,
need to, for community sales pitch, be able to say, as a separate project, we are considering having a skateboard park somewhere in the nearby vicinity, right?
And I guess, sorry.
Just the process. We are going to be undertaking public consultation of Lot 2. This should be part of it. I don't think this committee, it's within
Yeah.
this committee's mandate to even commit to
No.
areas beyond the footprint of the
I
community
think
center.
just the note that we'd be very interested in having land for a skateboard.
so not
Yes,
part of
and that's the
discussion.
discussion that has to happen through that,
But if
with the rest of
if
council.
the community's expecting it to be in our footprint,
No,
then we need to just identify.
Even if it
a
is,
place
it's
where it
not
could
within the
go.
boundaries of the
But it's
project,
not
but it's
within the
like,
boundaries of this project.
So, along with all the other stuff we're talking about, we want to get to the Gate 3 approval process with what we've got so far.
yeah,
And then at that point, if the project's a go, that would be the opportunity to say, and we're gonna add this other component that hasn't been included to date, because we don't wanna add that prior to
No,
the
no,
date.
certainly not, no.
It's a totally different exercise. However, somebody needs to keep track of these ideas so that as soon as gate 3 is done, we talk about them again, about.
Oh, yeah, they're not going
What's
away.
gonna-
But I guess from, I think what Kathy's saying,
Well,
I don't think.
think we are talking about them
Oh,
again.
okay, or we, or
Unless
not,
we're asked
exactly.
to by
Yeah,
I don't-
municipality because they have impetus to do so, but it would be
I
a
think
change
all-
of
yeah.
scope.
okay,
We just need to be able to say, the skate park can be accommodated elsewhere on the lot, or Lorne will be a separate project. We don't need to do it as part of the community.
So I think it's-
No.
So I was just gonna say, I think it's important for our council members sitting on this committee, champions of this project, is when council discusses Lot 2 and the uses, is to bring this forward as something to add to the mix. I
And
think
it
that's
should
the
come from
important-
the rec commission large, too.
It
Yeah.
is.
Well,
Well, I think it should come from
Yeah.
both, it would carry a lot of
Yeah.
weight coming from both groups.
Does that also
Well, there's
apply for
absolutely no question
conversation
about that.
about Muni Hall then?
Yeah.
If there's consideration of pulling it out and putting it as a separate thing, does that also have to?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't hear any uptake from the council members around the table for that, and I was just putting out my, that's up to you guys, that's up to, it's amazing how quiet the room just got.
Like I said, I think we should, you know,
So far,
move forward on this path, and if.
that's our marching
and
orders,
re-
that's our project scope.
Yeah,
and that's where we're
absolutely.
going. So
Yeah.
unless,
Yeah, that's it, and that's,
Heck, I will pick any route that gets us to a community
Yeah,
center.
yeah.
If you say build a carnival center there, I'll do
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I was saying what I've heard, but we have a project scope that we need to move forward on, we have commitment from council.
Yeah.
And there is that, yeah, if we start changing at this stage, it's
well,
gonna cause.
and I think we have to be very
Yeah.
careful about just changing in direction
Mhm.
because of what we're hearing.
We're gonna lose a
The
lot of
local
credibility.
minority, the tyranny of the minority.
yeah, okay.
So the question I have for, again, the same group there is for Craig's report, this DD report, how do you want them to address these things or leave the report silent?
Silence.
Silent, exactly, yeah, no, that's.
Yeah, this is just fluff on the side that we'll deal with.
Ooh,
It's-
shut up,
it's
stop.
They're the best ideas, and I think they're the ideas that may actually help sell the project and that sort of thing. It's just that at this point, until we are done design development,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's only gonna slow down that process if
Yeah.
we start adding
Yeah.
scopes of work that are undefined.
I don't think we lose focus, that's the problem.
I have
So I have
one
one
other
question
thing.
about the climbing wall,
Oh, yeah.
because it did come in, it is in the rec plan, and it did come up with the rec commission. Can it be added 10 years down, or 5 years down the road? Like, can we add a climbing wall outside the rec fitness area
Yes,
Yes.
that's against
It's
the
just
wall? like
anchor-
just
anchorage
on
to
the
the wall is all that's really needed and,
Alright.
So as long as.
structurally, people are light.
Okay,
we had this discussion with our structural engineer yesterday.
okay.
Yeah, we actually asked them about it.
Great.
Oh, good.
They're like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's a new one." Last thing is, and we do need some direction on this, is around exterior lighting and pathways, access to the community center. Currently, we've been focused on the building itself and maybe a bit of building lighting around the perimeter, but the issue of parking being dispersed and access from the school to the community center, we just want to understand what we should be showing in terms of design development, how big of a picture we want to show, where the connections.
How far beyond the property lines are we working?
Yeah.
Exactly.
My thought,
Even not beyond the property lines, but
Even
on,
like-
on the property.
Yeah, do we need area lighting beyond the face of the building, basically?
now, I would say it's maybe a security issue, and that's a whole different thing. But, you know, the feeling on Bowen is absolutely minimal lighting.
But a lot of people have raised the question about being able to walk at night from the
Oh, I agree.
parking lot of the school to the.
Yeah, I mean, you have minimal lighting.
I would make a recommendation to be, this is one where you should probably commit to being future ready in terms of underground
Yeah.
conduits.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
And table
On
it
our
until you
land
can.
and the one that we're.
I think there's a danger to, in the assumption that all lighting is bad, or
I
that
agree.
all lighting creates light pollution. and that there's a place for landscape lighting, and it provides an atmosphere of security and enhances the project. It spreads the project beyond the walls of the building into the surrounding landscape, and can actually establish a methodology where, again, the municipality can take a leadership role and say, yeah, we think there should be lighting in the community, and it's going to be low scale, it's going to be downward facing, but it's going to provide a level of ambience beyond the walls of buildings, so it feels okay to walk around at night.
So something you might want to give our consultant is, we have a night sky bylaw
Right?
Yeah.
for light pollution.
Yeah.
And I honestly haven't looked at it since we adopted it.
Generally
10
speaking, it means that you
years
just
ago.
have to downward.
Yeah,
That might be
we
good
looked at
information.
that.
From the
Okay,
property
good,
line
okay.
work.
Yeah, we looked at that and understanding, Melanie had a.
It's a comment actually, it says wordage around using smart technology or smart cities technology. It looks like that is gonna be a sort of another funding grant stream, especially from the federal government. We're looking at a smart cities application. And, yeah, so if we can start to use that technology for some of this stuff, I think we could then leverage that, especially for the lighting, you know.
So,
We also need to approach the lighting from a safety perspective.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
8
absolutely.
months out of the year, this building is gonna be highly used in the dark. You're gonna have kids using the community center, you're gonna have people coming to community meetings at nighttime. So, I mean, it's fine and dandy, we wanna keep a low lighting on Bowen Island, but you've gotta address the safety aspect.
All the stairs and everything like that all
Yeah.
have to be lit
Of the whole
properly,
site.
you know, it's.
Well, and I guess the question is, that, first of all, great, because that's what we agree as well. The second question is, how far do you want to extend? Because, are we talking as far as the school or across the street, because there's a crosswalk there, or?
I think there'd be a school, because the school suggested interest in sort of a caution, that they said, you know, if you want to be using our parking lot, we might not have the budget to put the required lighting in.
Or
but
pathway?
The pathway, but, you know, if that was something that you wanted to use, then you'd have to maybe
yeah, they
consider
were
that.
concerned
So,
about the safety of getting people from the parking lot.
Yeah,
So
And I think the school is lit all the way to the end, isn't
Yeah.
it?
which may just.
I don't know, but I mean, I think if we're talking about scope, I think definitely the school district, and anywhere else we're suggesting that we want to, you know, if we want to leverage parking elsewhere, then
I think we've also talked about there being a big path along the backside of the
Fence, yeah.
grass field and a great big crosswalk for the kids to be able to access the community
So that
center
needs to be lit.
through the parking lot. So all of that
Yeah.
actually needs to be lit for
Right there by the
safety.
skateboard park there.
Right, right along the skate
Yeah,
park
so
there.
Right next to the school.
everything from, I guess, this end all the way down and to the end of the fence and along.
So some municipalities I've worked with on projects like this where the scope can creep into the public realm like this, to try and control that scope and cost, sometimes my recommendation would be, let's focus on the property lines and
Yeah,
create
put the
designs.
conduit there.
Yep.
And create design standards for what that continuous piece would be, and that's either a separate project and maybe a separate contractor, because putting all of this into a tender, it
No.
gets challenging, and maybe it might be Bowen Island's own forces that contract out and do some of that
Agreed.
sort of public realm work.
Yeah, just stub it out at the end of the property line.
Well, because it,
That's kind of.
it's
what I'm-
essentially off-site costs,
Yeah.
which are usually, the scope of work for off-site is usually determined by the municipality.
Mhm.
So you could treat yourself like the developer and require all that work to be done as part of the off-site cost for this project, or you could require that to not be done, but be ready for it so you don't have to pay for it. It's kind of
Yeah.
funny because you're the one who determines the scope of work, and at the same time, you're the one who pays for it, so.
Mhm.
But I
I
think
guess
the question
from
is
the
also-
design development point of view, we need to know what that limit is. Is it the property line, or does it go further?
why don't we do property line, but then also have it sort of noted that future additional work would be required.
So I think
Property line for sure.
from an electrical perspective, you're gonna have to size the panels that it can do more and be serviced from the
Well,
building.
yeah, it becomes a question of whether this building is providing electricity for this light, and there's a
Exactly.
number of questions, you know. It's also there's a big unknown about the whole parking situation, and does it really make sense to be using the school parking lot, which is half a kilometer away, and provide lighting from it all the way to this building, or do you put a parking lot next door to the building? You know, there's some bigger questions. I think going to the property line is where we should be with this particular
And then we have
question.
specs and standards for continuousness, and if we need to expand on the scope of a pathway design, you know, we probably need to get a landscape architect, if not,
We have one.
yeah, to look at something there.
But at the moment, we're limiting to property line. And whatever ends at the property line is designed for future extension, perhaps to the school, perhaps down the road,
Agreed.
perhaps to a parking lot.
There is a piece of coordination here between this and the landscape architect, the lighting, and the traffic consultant, and what's happening at this newly created intersection, and the crosswalks and
Yep.
so on, how that
Correct.
all works together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the traffic study was a really good piece to introduce because it may point to the fact that actually you want to spend some offsite money just dealing with that intersection, and the site lighting can be done as part of whatever overflow parking project number one.
Yeah, I think we should stay responsible to the community center as a building and look after that area personally,
Okay.
however that works
So
out.
what are we at there, 15 million?
What?
Yeah, I know.
No.
I think that's it. That's
Okay, so what about time now?
We didn't,
Are you guys okay?
we had hoped to talk about each of the engineering disciplines independently. We've really touched on the electrical, I think, pretty much. We're looking at LED fixtures for the building throughout the interiors,
Yeah.
motion sensors, that kind of thing. Mechanical, we talked briefly about the mechanical system, the air-to-water heat pump, and 3 air handling units. Structural systems we've been looking at sort of very basic structural systems for the building. Slab on grade construction through 75% of the building, suspended slab under sort of over the large multi-purpose room, which will create a basement and crawl space area where our mechanical, electrical rooms are going to be, and some limited storage. Conventional wood frame wall systems, and the 2 large volume spaces, the large multi-purpose and the rec facilities are flat roofs with gang nail trusses, and then we have, again, gang nail engineered trusses over the roof space, over the bin wing, and then through the living room and small multi-purpose room, we're looking at something more architectural with exposed timber work and that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And we've been back and forth with structural engineers about all of that.
Sorry, Drew, I just unplugged the wrong thing.
So we're gonna,
Does that mean we have to boot all of you?
Well, you guys should be, if you want to hit that 12, I think, that's kind of a wrap from the design team perspective?
No.
We've gone through the sort of big questions that we
Who's got
wanted.
the whole page?
I don't know.
Well,
We want to talk about schedule.
we wanted to talk about schedule.
I was gonna ask about schedule, because I've seen
So are you
some,
okay with catching the one on the news, area?
Yeah, that's fine.
And then we change
Sam,
my appointment.
everybody? You better go?
I have another meeting at 1.
At 1, okay, well, it's,
The fair's at 1:10, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to just go through, I mean,
good. Let's do it.
schedule is,
Are you
I
okay?
think we're,
Let's see if we can get that back up, because I think there's some
Yeah.
sort of evocative images we have there.
which one?
On the interiors, we have those.
No. There we go.
so just so we just start on the same page, previously we thought we would do DD complete by the end of the month, and then we would take a couple weeks to get a cost report, and
Are we out of, can I turn the lights on?
I think there's, you guys are starting something back up?
We don't really need to show,
And aiming for date 3 and the end of April. But it seems to me, after today's discussion, it looks like end of the month for DD isn't,
It's realistic.
it's, no, I mean, I was mapping it out as a possibility, but there's a few changes that might push it further. What I had was, Energy modeling,
20th.
which is happening the week of March 19th, so it's happening on the 20th. Between now and then, we're continuing to sort of develop the base design for that meeting. Start on this, well, we've already started, but the generator backup power fuel, like that's a little nugget to solve unto itself. And hopefully starting some work around acoustics in the theater.
One of the things that we did want to get some clarity on much sooner than later, Sam, can you give us an update on your conversations about the additional geotechnical work?
Hasn't gone too much forward.
Because we really need to get a really clear sense of what we have underneath the building in that area. So if you like, I mean, we can make the contact and with the geotechnical.
I did reach out, I just didn't hear back.
Okay.
So
If
if you want to press,
He needs to be,
okay.
yeah.
So when do you need that done by?
Yesterday?
Oh,
It's not really in the critical path, Allison, but
okay.
it's important to us to understand how much space we have underneath the building, the basement area, how much blasting we need to do, if any.
So you need to do that before
Has it
we.
been flagged?
Has it
Has it
been
been flagged?
surveyed, or the area we want the geotech done in?
Well, just sort of flagged, the building flagged over there, because that's gonna be
Not
of
yet.
interest.
No, it hasn't been surveyed, no corners posted.
Can we get some dimensions for that?
We could
We could definitely.
simultaneously, we
Off
could
the
do,
fence.
Do you want to get Bennett back in to do that, or do you?
No, just rough, you should be able to just take it off the computer. I'm just trying to get some rough data.
Well, is that
well,
what
we would send that overall footprint to the geotechnical consultant. And that's what, if you guys could do that, send them the footprint so they know the areas.
Yeah, and are you contacting them to get them additional?
I did no feedback, so if you want to poke them by saying, this is the scope that we're looking for,
Oh, that
and
would
then
be
you
a
can
nice
just
poke.
do a red dot. Drew, because you have probably some,
Yeah, I can contact
Greg
Greg.
Van
It was
Dusen.
Greg you were in
Greg,
touch with, right?
the guy you sent me an email.
Yeah.
So can I guess what Gary's asking is, we've been talking, it might be nice to flag the corners of the building.
Well, I'd like to have an idea of where it's sitting
Have
on
an
the
idea of where it's
building.
gonna sit, and how big it's gonna be?
Yeah, I'm not
Those
sure
are
how
visual
useful that is
challenges.
really gonna be, because it's, the site is gonna go through so much transformation that, I don't think it would be able to perceive what that is gonna be like.
There's quite a bit, the
Is that a
excavation
human
is fairly significant.
Sorry?
Was that a human sound?
Yeah.
This is a good
That was
contractor
awesome.
project, Gary, if you want to get out of some stakes.
No, I don't mind, I'm prepared to flag it, all I want is just a little
Well,
piece of paper saying go
well, George
134
could
feet
do
down.
the volunteer probably to help you.
Well, sure.
Well, we can send you the same thing we'll send to.
Yeah, that'd be awesome,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't have, plus or minus 6 feet, I just want to get something out there for the public to,
Like how far back it's gonna be from the fence and all.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
we can give you 4 corners where you can.
Yeah, just something like that,
Sure.
that'd be awesome. Perfect, thank you.
And we're
7
being-
corners.
So
Yeah,
we're
seven-
not
seven-
looking-
12 corners.
I don't want to.
How complex do we want it to be?
So are we
Very
looking at
simple.
April 27th or not?
No, okay, so, I don't even know what schedule you're looking
Well,
at.
I'm looking at this handout, there it is there.
So what we mapped out
Sure, how
is
useful that is.
best case scenario, after energy modeling, consultants need still a couple weeks in order to get their design development input to us.
Yeah,
We still need a couple of weeks in order to develop the design development report so that it's ready to present to the steering committee.
but so,
And
but
so we
hold
need-
on. Key milestone is sending it to PQS.
Oh, well, yeah,
April 9th.
we had, April 9th. So after the consultants had their input,
So that's, and then 2 weeks after that, so
So-
March 20th plus 2 weeks is the date you're ready to send it to a quantity surveyor?
April 9th to the QS.
April 9th goes to the QS, so that would be the consultant's work has been done after 2 weeks after the energy modeling.
Yeah.
We would have enough to send to the QS at that time as well with the consultant's work. And then we would have additional work to do for the design development report.
Yeah.
While Ewan's working on the costing, we're developing the design development report. And so we have steering committee review of draft design development report during the week of April 23rd to 27th.
So we're not going to
And then
cancel until.
Potential gate approval at council, week of May 7th.
There's not a second meeting,
How,
So,
how, is it 10 days before council that the report needs to go?
Oh, that's, no, we can be flexible with that. That's when I have to get staff reports to review, but
Okay.
we publish the agenda 5 days in advance of the meeting, so as long as we had it circulated before
right? And
then.
the council meeting is May the 14th.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really difficult right now to get council members on an off-council meeting date. It's hurting cats.
What's the meeting before May 14th?
And
April 26th, I
April
think,
23rd, so.
23rd.
we're not
Yeah,
gonna do
don't
it.
worry.
Yeah,
So you would be aiming for the
May 14th.
May
May
14th, and that's an evening meeting. I mean, there could be a committee of the whole.
Yeah, we
in
could
the
do it now,
afternoon,
late afternoon,
but
but,
that would be the
Correct,
day to
back.
aim for, which means you need the package ready for the 9th, right?
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
By May 9th.
Yeah.
Well, it has to be in Tyler's hands by the morning because he publishes.
So I guess that's a procedural question. Do you want a written report to go to council beforehand, or do you want to walk them through it as a PowerPoint and hand them the written report at that time?
Oh, Councillor Morse, how do you feel when that happens to you, when you're sitting at the
Well,
other
I
end
guess
of
it
the
depends
table?
on whether there's how big a report it's gonna be.
Is it gonna be,
She's not
there's gonna be a
answering
lot of
No,
stuff
she's
of detail that needs to be reviewed.
Okay.
The whole DD report.
That's not fair.
Probably
So it's not gonna be a 5-page executive summary report, it's gonna be another big one like
Is,
the last one.
The councillors would probably have access to the whole DD report, would they
Yeah.
not?
They should,
that would make
Yeah.
sense, they're making the decision.
So
Yeah.
they're probably gonna want at least a week
yeah,
with that material,
Yeah.
at least.
So,
for sure. Get better buy-in, the longer time you
yeah,
have
no,
to
so
review.
May the
Yeah.
9th to Tyler.
That's only minimal.
Is this gonna be an open committee of the whole or a closed
So May the
one?
7th, DD report to councilors.
Why wouldn't it be open?
I don't know, I'm just asking.
I think it should be.
I think it should be.
Absolutely.
Well, you're talking about you didn't want the general public getting all the design development
Well, the
detail.
councilors ahead of time would get the design development report to review.
Yeah,
At the council meeting, we would walk through a presentation that would be brief and summary, and that's what is available to the public.
Similar to last time,
What's
similar,
going on the agenda documents, because the documents that are presented as part of the agenda all go on the website.
so the agenda
So just the
documents
summary.
would be just the summary PowerPoint presentation and maybe the summary project management report.
Okay.
But I would say it's even just the summary PowerPoint presentation. The summary report from the financial and schedule perspective and the detailed DD report are materials for their review, but
In
not
advance for
necessarily on the,
information.
For the public.
their information.
But you'll be speaking to it and presenting it, so then it'll become public documents.
So does it? then
No, not
become-
necessarily.
Why would they?
You would
become-
just have the summary document, you
Executive
present the
summary.
summary, they ask you questions about it because they know all about it because they read the design development report.
Huh.
But you just answer on the summary and
Those documents wouldn't be on the agenda? That's 'cause my
It's-
question.
Yeah.
I think it's, council is not the venue to talk about technical components of the design development report.
Yeah.
It's awfully difficult to give council members material that isn't included in an agenda, like just process-wise.
Yeah.
Whatever is given to them should be appearing, unless it's in a closed meeting, should be appearing as publicly available. So I think we have to kind of think what level of information, sort of like Raj is doing with the budget, is it just a higher level that we're also presenting to council? I think we just need to kind of think strategically about that
I'm
because,
sort of flagging it, we don't have to decide today, but I think it's a
Yeah.
discussion that you need to have with Kathy about, just process and.
yeah. I mean, historically, that's what we've done, there's an expectation, and I think it would make council members uncomfortable being outside a closed meeting to have material that's not publicly available.
Okay, so we give them everything.
Or we just can talk, we can talk.
Or
about
just
it.
give them the summary.
The detail. and
just
then
give them
you
the
have to open
summary
meeting
with
after.
the
Yeah,
background
the councilors don't
information
need all the
available.
detail.
Yeah, that's where I'm.
The steering
sort of going
committee
with it.
needs the
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah.
They make a recommendation to council based on a summary.
Council
Yeah.
doesn't care how many
Yeah.
you're doing.
Because council has
Yes.
empowered this committee to make to make the majority of the recommendations.
Yeah.
So where are they gonna have a
So
steering
it's a
committee
summary.
meeting in then before May the 9th?
Yeah,
Steering committee has a review
Last
on
week of
April
April.
23rd to 27th a week.
Okay. And that would be the meeting with all the documents.
that would be the
The-
review of the design development
It
report
wouldn't
with
necessarily-
a little bit of room for adjustment if something is
Yeah.
crazy
You
otherwise.
wouldn't have the full summary report,
But those dates.
because if you give the QS the documents for costing on the 9th, they're probably not gonna have a response until the 23rd.
That's right, that's exactly
So
my
now
time.
we're looking at the last meeting in May
And
for
so-
council then.
So.
But that's what we did last time. He gave them to us like literally the day before.
Right, so that we will have the cost report and we will have the technical DD report, but we won't have the summary report complete for that steering committee.
Oh, I see, okay, yeah.
Mm.
Correct.
But that meeting can inform the
But this-
summary report, and then we
yeah.
can
I
circulate it
could,
by
and
email.
I could even have a draft one and saying, okay,
Yeah.
here's where this data is gonna go.
Great.
How does the steering committee want the summary report to
Yeah.
look?
And then we
That's
can just
going to
circulate it by email to the steering committee.
So we're still on for that.
council. So you're still on for a steering committee
So
sometime
let's set
between-
that date. Can we set that date and time right now?
26th? Oh, wait. April.
Okay, is that-
Maybe Thursday.
That's a Thursday.
Just a minute, I was running over the other calendar.
Oh, that's fine.
So,
I have this plugged in for power. Doesn't do this after, and then it's back to
26th gives us a couple days to make.
Talking about
Have a
technocrats here.
summary report done.
Could it be in the afternoon on the 26th?
perpetual motion. Okay, April. What day?
26.
Thursday?
No, not in the afternoon, but not in the morning.
And Thursday,
What's on the
26th in
morning?
the afternoon?
1 o'clock?
1 o'clock in the afternoon of the 26th.
You know that's my birthday.
Oh, we have to have cake.
Perfect.
We'll have cake.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of whether I'm busy or whether it might be fun.
not
You just want to ignore
Well,
it.
then we could do
More
the
importantly, it's
25th.
my birthday.
that's
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's more important in
As
my
long as there's a
world.
balloon in here, I'm good. 1 o'clock's good.
I didn't do that right, did I?
So you're a tourist too, eh?
It's like my mother.
Yeah.
You stubborn bulls.
Yeah.
My
And
mother's
you
one
figured
too.
that out already? Okay.
How
Other
long do you think that
schedule?
meeting's gonna be?
What's that?
Oh, about 4 hours.
Sorry, what date are we looking at again?
April
April
26th.
26th in the
Thursday.
afternoon.
Yeah, that's 4 days from my mother's birthday.
Or do you want to do the Wednesday?
The Queen's
Well,
birthday's
can you,
around
can
there.
you front load it?
Front load is
You're
at
at what,
3?
3? Do you have to, or 3:30?
3. I can push Thursday to 3.
Well, we got a little bit sidetracked today, so it's gonna be like today.
I'm just saying if you could, if there's any more important stuff, I can.
Well, we could start with cost and schedule,
Oh, front load the,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
and then we could get into.
Or
the-
could we start at 12:30
Yeah.
rather than 1?
yeah.
Oh, we can
Depends
front
on
load it.
30 times for these guys.
Well,
It's, and actually, I missed part of it because I'm getting worse at multitasking. Why can't we do it in the morning?
but I'm not coming in.
Allison's not available.
I'm not available in the morning.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just didn't,
Yeah.
I didn't hear whether we, there must have been a reason.
So
But I'm
12:30?
available all day on the Wednesday.
To 12:30 or shall we, does that work?
What's the fair
What time
time?
is the
It
fair?
doesn't
If
really
it was
matter.
leaving here at noon, it was leaving here at noon.
Yeah, so they'd be catching 11:30 fare from the other side. You'd be up here between noon and 12:30.
Well, I'm open all day, so.
What time?
Once we're here, we're here. We'll catch the noon.
So.
Is that what you said? The noon?
Yeah.
Or 11:30?
Leaves here at
11:30.
noon, So you'd have to
Oh,
catch
it's
the
fine.
11:30.
Okay,
It's
11:30.
11:30.
I don't know.
Isn't quite
So
We're
say
still
12:30.
We're still
here
not
at
used
noon,
to
so
it.
it must be
It's
scheduled.
scheduled.
12:30?
And I don't know.
Oh, in April, it'll be a different
New
schedule.
It will be,
schedule,
it'll be
yeah.
different.
Change
I can
the,
check it.
Yeah, but I think
March
it's the
28th
same in the
change.
morning. I made a note somewhere.
This is not your life.
Yeah.
Starting at 1?
Let's say between 12:30 and 1.
It's all about
We'll
ferry
check the ferry
schedules.
schedule and confirm.
Yeah,
So
that's
The end of March it changes.
I hate it.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, but
Like
that's,
making my
Yeah, what do you
connections
got for
to
March?
Gambler as an extra hour. Because
Seriously?
it changed
March,
the quality time for myself.
First,
Yeah,
2016.
yeah.
All right, and the change
But you guys just let
It
me know.
is 11:25 and
11:25.
12:35. So actually, we're on the
11:25,
11:25.
yeah,
then we could,
We
we
could start
could
earlier?
start noon or 12:15.
At lunch?
12:15 and blow the budget for lunch, or bring our brown bag, one or the
I'll let Tyler know that we're committing to probably likely a committee of the whole on May 14th. Is that the date we're looking at?
other. Yes,
Okay.
The afternoon.
What I would suggest maybe is 1 o'clock on a Monday. Just to keep the May 14th meeting.
I'm at the whim of after-school club.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So rather than a late afternoon meeting, we do an early afternoon meeting?
Sure.
Yeah.
So can I just ask about that? The committee of the whole would be before the council meeting?
Yes.
yeah.
And so we would be presenting at both then?
No, I would suggest we just do it at the afternoon meeting. We could make it a special council meeting instead of a committee of the whole, if we're looking for decision points, right?
But if,
Yeah,
they- again,
Gate 3.
if this is to present council, oh no, council's not getting the whole package.
No. It's just, because it's regular business in the evening, to put something this big and try and fit it into our regular
Yeah.
meeting is,
So this would only be included in the committee of the whole?
yeah,
Or
or
a
as I said, a
special
special council meeting if we want decision
Okay,
points.
so it'll be the
So
afternoon.
this is to get us
of-
through
Gate
gate,
3.
great
Gate
gate 3, so it has to be.
Yeah, and we'd be doing a short shrift if we tried to shoehorn it into a regular meeting.
So this is gate
May
3
14th.
approval to proceed to gate 4,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Okay, I'll send Tyler an email right now. So
And
I'm
gate 4 gets us to what?
60%, no,
To proceed to
30% working hours. 30
Oh,
or
does it?
60?
Doesn't get us to tender?
We still have gate 5.
There's a midterm step.
Holy.
Call a referendum.
It could be
Grant
very, it can
funding.
just be a briefing note type update and,
Right.
it's just so we can do a cost check in case anything was missed between gate 3. Remember, there's a bunch of things we just went through here, we're saying, okay,
Yeah.
as soon as
Yeah.
that's done, now let's do the due diligence of these pieces.
Yeah.
So that's
But it
what
was
the
meant
purpose
to
of
be
gate 4 is for.
Before the referendum.
So May
It's more
14th for the
financial,
committee of the
it's a more
whole.
of a financial.
Well,
check
do we have a
for
time on that yet?
Design update.
I'd suggest 1 o'clock based on council members' schedule.
Okay,
I'm not sure who our mayor is, so we're going to be away, but and I'll have to find out who the acting mayor is, but, and I'm assuming we're looking for decision points at that meeting, Sam, is that?
Ideally, the one key decision is to move forward
Okay.
So
into
when is
working
the,
drawings and start working on the contract documents.
So rather than a committee of the whole, we'll structure it as a special council meeting, so decisions can be made at that meeting.
That would
so
be good.
Okay.
when does the mayor go and come back?
Mid-April, he's back for the May 28th meeting.
And he's not back much before the 28th?
No.
must be nice. April
Yeah.
26th, 12 o'clock, that's what we got.
For a special council meeting.
12, okay.
May 14th.
No,
of
April
August.
26th is our
Assuming
our
special
ceremony.
referendum. We'll be
Or is
asking,
it 25, so it
for
should
the,
be.
will it be similar to what we did for the fire hall?
It would be exactly the same.
So we can change design.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah,
have no
well,
design for the fire hall.
from-
That's
No,
what
no,
you're
that's,
saying.
that's
That's a
what's
totally
different.
separate project.
That- it's-
No, but from a process perspective, just because the question we're asking is, are you in favor of borrowing up to X amount of money? That's all the question is.
But to your point,
For
it's
a
a
fire hall.
totally different process.
Yes, it's a different project, like at different stages, but the question will be
Okay,
exactly the
question.
The
same.
referendum, imagine this referendum,
So
if
once
this
we
was
go
the-
to referendum and we get a yes, we're committed to this design.
Well,
we're
something
already
that will
committed
cost
to
us
this
Yeah.
thing.
design.
You're already committed to this.
That
I'm
process,
just-
that process did what I would call a concept feasibility plan to get a budget and get borrowing approved. This one's already got approval to do design right until every gate step approval
Okay.
until ready to
Yeah.
go into construction in a design bid build process.
But the question is exactly the same.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you
the-
also don't want to fundraise and raise a couple $1 million with some donors and then change the design because they'll want their money
I'm
back.
just curious to know that.
But it's a very different
Well, they're
process
not
in the fire
providing
hall.
money check, they'll just be pledging.
Like in
Well,
terms
They
of,
may pull the pledge at that
The
point.
design.
Yeah.
in terms of
So,
design
you
progress
wanna
versus
not
referendum,
change the design.
we're like, design process, like referendum's way over there. For the fire hall, it was almost like referendum first, design process.
Yeah, that's the ones,
Oh, okay.
But the question is,
Well, we did the design process for the powerhouse.
They did some design.
Yeah, we knew what we were gonna build, and
Right.
it's a very different building.
Definitely different.
But supposedly we won't go to referendum unless we have built some confidence that we can pay for it.
Because if we had done it that way, we'd be in the same boat where are with the fire hall right now, where it's not moving much. It's
Okay,
moving
fine.
slowly.
Oh, so you're happy with this one? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I like this process.
Okay, fine.
There's a,
No offense to the council members.
Oh, is there really? It's never too late.
Yeah.
Okay, so how we doing? We got those dates
Okay, so
established.
what's to happen at gate 5?
gate 5 is approval to
I
proceed
can't see
with
that far
construction.
Well, no, but approval to proceed to what? Like, you've got the construction contract documents. So are you,
Gate 5 is essentially, we would be going there with complete contract documents
and wanting to issue them
and
at this
an
point?
ask to go to tender so that we can get open market pricing.
So you
That'd be
you want to
easy.
ask to go to tender before we have the referendum?
Well, the schedule's changing a bit, right? So,
But
no, we wouldn't, that is inevitably gonna be tied to the referendum now.
Gate 5 is
It will
basically,
be tied to the referendum.
Yeah, but.
we
you
have
know,
the documents, we wanna go into tender, but before we go to tender, we need to make sure that everybody's on board with spending the
So
money and it all
Gate
happens.
5 now is more, can we go to referendum with these materials, and once the referendum's approved, we're gonna go into the construction
No,
process.
because once we've done the bylaw and done second and third reading, that's the number that we're going to referendum with, and that's not going to change. So gate 5
What's
approved,
not going to change?
the money we're asking, I mean,
Question.
we've done the bylaw is gonna say how much we're wanting to borrow up to, and the referendum question's gotta be drafted by when? Month before?
July 23rd?
Yeah, no, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be drafted till it actually, process-wise, we have to get council approval on the referendum question, and then the bylaw comes forward for readings, but it can all be done in the same meeting.
Yeah,
So-
but we're
so
still
the
talking about
referendum
the end of
amount
July,
and the
early
tender
August
amount
to
are
do
totally
that.
disconnected from each other, right?
We're still,
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
but you can't approve issuing the tender documents until after you've had the referendum, to know that you've got the ability.
We have to go
borrow.
through the quashing period, we
And
have
we have to go through the quashing period and all
it's a
that
month
stuff.
after
So-
the,
So if
60 or
Gate
30?
5 approval is giving us approval to issue to go to step 6, which is issue the tender documents, then it has to be after the referendum.
Does it not also have to be after your grant application?
And then we've got the
Because-
grant application, which is the other kicker we gotta throw in there.
When's that?
Well, we don't
We
know
don't know.
because
Well,
they
you
didn't
have
announce
to-
it in either budget.
And, yes, and it's been clear that unless we have
We have to be
strong support of
essential.
community, we can't go to,
Yeah.
we can't apply for the grant.
We've been
Or we
told
won't be successful in
our
our
MP, we
application.
met with our
our
MP.
MP that we have to have all our
Last week.
money lined up before the open
Made
season.
it quite
for
clear.
our grant.
Yeah, we
So
have
maybe
to
we
come up
need
with
to
$3 million
Look
before
at the
we.
gate approval processes and make some changes, or add an additional gate, or delete a
Do something,
gate, or.
yeah.
And the other conversation that I think, and I think it's more between you and Raj, is the dollar amount for the referendum.
Yeah,
Because Raj has, I think, some ideas and, about we keep it to what we actually need. So I think that's just a sidebar conversation that the two of you should have.
Do you think, sorry, would that reduce the number
Well,
Of course.
that we,
Yeah.
Sam is wanting us to have the question asked to borrow up to 10 million.
So I think this is just, we have limited time today, I think it's a good
I'm
conversation.
just
Yeah.
saying if the conclusion of that conversation is a smaller number, then I think that's an incredibly important conversation.
Yes, absolutely,
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
totally.
Can we release the construction tender documents before we've got the certificate of approval?
I don't know, we'd have to ask.
Risky.
Mm.
There you go, there's the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the referendum where we know it's passed, but once we get past the quashing period for 30 days and nobody complains, and we then issue the tender.
And the only thing they can complain about is
Process.
the process used for the referendum. They can't, yeah.
So I would think the earliest we could issue the tender release would be the 19th of November.
I don't think you want to go issuing tender documents on wish and a prayer either,
Yeah.
you know.
No, you,
They don't
you
know the
also don't
money's
wanna
there.
issue them and go through the tender and then, either delay unnecessarily or cancel because you'll get zero response when you try to.
Next time, yeah,
Yeah, we
absolutely.
gotta ask, and we gotta get the grant, the grant funding.
And you
is a
might get
big
zero
question mark
response
in
if they
all
know you
this.
haven't got the money either.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
is-
yeah, no, it's
Hello.
tricky as for the whole piece, but get it. We'll have to
Okay.
do some changes to process.
So Sam, so I'm just sending Tyler an email. What we're looking for on the 14th is approval of gate 4.
Yes,
Okay.
which is
No.
only.
Oh, no, it's
No,
approval of gate
gate
3
three.
to
I
go.
get so
Proceed
confused with these
to
gates.
It's moving to.
Okay, so
I mean,
approval of
I-
gate
I
3?
approve of
Approval of
course.
gate 3 to move
Okay.
towards
Through
completing the
gate.
documents.
We're gonna go through number 3 gate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To then move into
So-
going.
Just wanna go to the next
to
step.
Gotta unlock
Into
that
the
gate so
fourth.
we can get through it.
Into the fourth.
Lock the gate behind you.
Yeah.
No going back.
No changes. It is locked.
Are you finished with your part? I just wanted to get
Yes.
design team, you happy with that?
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for all that input. That's super useful.
Sam, how about you? You wanna go through this,
No.
the rest of this? Okay.
Did you turn over the page, which answers the question of how long it's gonna take to build it? People will ask me.
Pardon?
You've got a timeline for construction in here, too.
I do, just for information, it's not, just so you kind of know where you're going.
Well, people ask, well, once you start to build, how long is it gonna take to build, so it's.
Yeah, it's there. And we have a more detailed breakdown in the Gantt chart that we've sent out.
That would be in
What
the
is
case
it,
for
year and a
support.
half? Year and a half?
When we built
Could be it.
February 2019 to August 2020.
Yep. Just so we
Fast
know.
track.
The amount of money they're gonna have, it's probably take that long.
Well, we put a Gantt chart together with the budget.
So new business, let's move on to that, 6.1.
Just wondering if there's-
That's the communication subcommittee.
Do we need Craig and Drew, or can we?
There may be things that these subcommittees want from.
Certainly your option. Certainly your option to stay here.
From us. So should we stay? Here we go.
That's good.
So there was some discussion around, well, the municipal offices. I don't even know if this is relevant anymore to today's meeting, but
Yes,
in
it
terms
is.
of the muni offices and the pool, there's still a lot of discussion in the community, and there was a suggestion from the Recreation Commission that maybe there be a separate page or half page or something on each of those issues, describing scenarios, why it's a good thing, or describing why the muni offices are beneficial within this facility, and having some story, telling the story, basically, that we were talking about earlier today. Do we think that should be a separate page on the website? So it's not buried in the FAQs, it's something we can send people directly to for both of these.
Well, can it be a separate page but still within the FAQs?
Well, I think so.
Or if you could group
Or
the
if it could
FAQs.
be grouped or
Yeah.
something, if they're, do we think that's a good idea to have it a little bit more prominent?
I
Because those are
definitely
the
think
big
it is.
things that have come up in the community.
Why not?
I can't see that it can
I
hurt
don't think there's
anything.
any drawback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've half drafted them, so I'll just work on that and then circulate it to the steering committee.
I can help you with that if you want, yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's
And there's one for, you got one for the swimming pool also.
And I've got stuff for the swimming pool also, yes.
So the swimming pool's moving ahead then?
Yes.
A lot of chatter on Facebook right now.
And then we got
Is there?
Yeah.
the space all designed and the layout for the paper cuts?
That's not a problem, yeah. Place for the cats to sit and everything.
The fundraising coordinator, can we move on to 6.2? You happy with that?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay. And so the RFP, anything been done?
Yep, so we've got, so Jackie and I met, we have, we're putting together an RFP,
Okay,
or RFQ, job description, terms of reference, and hiring timeline for the fundraising campaign coordinator. We had a discussion around whether or not we want the RFQ to be for the whole fundraising project, which we did put in the budget, the municipal budget for having more money than has already been approved for that. Or do we want to kind of piecemeal out a few things, like at this point, developing a fundraising cabinet and maybe having one kickoff event?
So we want a coordinator to do that.
But we would wanna hire a coordinator to do that piece, or do we wanna hire a coordinator to do that piece plus donor,
Are they doing
donor
the skill sets?
management, records?
It can be.
Setting up donation platform, organization of digital print presentation materials, database tracking, donor recognition, campaign administration. So that's more of the whole campaign. Or do we wanna just focus on coordination of a campaign cabinet and maybe one event to bring those people together to kind of kick it off?
But then you gotta go and do another RFQ for the next phase and, or
Yeah,
this
I
person
think
to
so.
quote two parts, phase one
Right.
being,
Well, we could do that.
and that way if we get totally killed at the soft opening.
Now, Jackie has, I mean, her experience.
Yeah,
right
so
Yeah,
just in
exactly
terms
what
of
the-
hiring a fundraiser for the entire project, and understand and then just getting them to work, they can work flat fee or they'll proposal for the project. So for the entire project, I mean, it's a considerable amount of money, and I understand that you asked for additional 20,000 to the 10,000 that we have. I mean, I would say it's 5 times more than that for the entire coordination of if you're hiring a professional fundraiser. So then I'm thinking if you want to go to RFP at this point, it's a huge process.
Yeah.
Right, and so I think it's gonna slow down things to some degree. If we want to move ahead with somebody with just the skill set to do the coordination of the fundraising cabinet work, which is about attracting private donations, I think we'd be moving a bit quicker, so that's one of the benefits of just doing
And then
that.
a clerical type to just do the tracking.
And, well, they would probably do that tracking too, that one person, I mean, I think that would be the scope of their work. And to have one person in charge of that, because there's some privacy confidential issues
Yeah.
around that too, so they need to be part of that process. So that's it. We were also ideally hoping to find somebody locally, and I think that that we may, I mean, I don't know who's out there, but if we are going through the entire scope of a fundraising campaign coordinator for the capital, then my guess is that we're gonna be looking at firms outside of Bowen Island.
Which could do us a disservice, I mean, having
Well,
those
and
local
again, they may be
connections.
connected to
Yeah.
Bowen, who knows what,
Yeah.
it's a whole different
Yeah.
process when I think about sending that out. that kind of RFP.
I guess the argument always is, the more you pay for your fundraising coordinator, the more money you make.
Oh, yeah.
That's an argument. I mean, that's,
Well, some of them just charge a flat fee based on how much you raise and others.
They
Just a
actually
percentage,
don't,
yeah.
they don't, that's actually considered unethical. So if you
I
look
would
through
think
the professional fundraisers code of conduct, they will never base it on a percentage of your capital project. That's just considered not ethical. So they will
Of the
structure
project,
a
not
fee
the
and they will
budget, yeah.
structure a cost for services provided, but, yes, but it's still significant. I mean, I don't want to underestimate the amount that it could be. And, you know, they estimate for a capital project, it could be between 10 and 15% of the entire capital cost. So I
Ouch.
can't imagine us paying that kind of money, but that's.
But what I like
that's
about your
what's-
approach is it also gives us flexibility. So, I mean, we can see how the fundraising cabinet flushes out, and, I mean, I think we just have to stay nimble and flexible. So if we commit ourselves to a really high dollar figure for our fundraising campaign manager,
that goes
one,
up.
there's gonna be.
Oh, I wouldn't.
There's
want
no
that. I
guarantees.
wouldn't want to commit to the whole thing up
No
front, but I
guarantees.
guess my concern was having to spend the time to do a second RFQ and whether we get back to this one so they would realize that there's phase one and then we may not proceed with phase two.
Mhm. Right, and
But if we got somebody we liked, we would want them to know that
They
There
could
could
carry
be-
on.
they could, you know,
If required.
carry on if required. Yeah, I didn't know how
So
you.
That's
so
why I
we
like
could
the
word
word
it that
nimble.
way.
we would ideally have close to this.
I just want to make sure that we've got enough capacity to make sure we can get whatever the activities or actions done. Because there's no capacity on the staff side of life. So I think whatever we need.
Right, so again, there's the
Make
phases
sure
to the
that-
campaign,
yeah.
right? So our first phase that we absolutely have to focus on right now, if there's any chance of
going to referendum in the fall, is to try to donate, to try to attract our major donors. And so that is that role that they would start with.
Yeah.
And then there will be a number of, potentially fundraising events or activities that others could be involved in. We already have the communications team on hand, which is really, again, integral to the entire campaign. So they would be working with the communications department. But you certainly could, do it in phases, and then ideally, if you did have somebody who had that full range skill set, add on to their contract as you go along.
So a phase and just build on it as we go through the hoops.
I think that would be probably a rational approach.
Yeah, I think so too. As long as somebody's willing to come along for that
Yeah,
ride.
for sure, and I
don't know
mean,
if they're-
great if somebody local who is
Yeah,
passionate about the
really.
project, that's the ideal, and.
Pro bono.
So we could,
Now you're dreaming, but, yeah.
we could describe phase one in detail, like what we're hoping for right away, and then say, and keep phase two a little bit more vague, if we don't want to
Yeah,
continue
they might
with
even
that
have some
same-
ideas of
They
the
may.
direction
That
to go,
same
that sort of thing.
They might want to talk about crowdsourcing down the road,
Mhm.
right, and that type of thing, and.
This is when you, the whole point of a proposal is their proposal, right? So when you procure a project manager or an architect, you often ask for their methodology and approach that they intend to lay out
Yeah,
to achieve
you have-
phase two.
Yeah,
Right.
did write that in.
We had that in there too.
So can I ask you a question? You've just come out of a fundraising exercise. Do you think there's still capacity, do you think there's still capacity within the community for another campaign?
I think there's tons of capacity, but there's all kinds of things that are, challenging, and a couple of the ones that I see are, there's two main things. So first of all, we really have to be clear on what we're asking for. So I'm a little concerned about the case for support, because we've been building this table of contents, and we are basically taking information that you're giving us to feed into that. So we need to be really clear on what we are presenting to the community and the rationale. So we're talking about the municipal hall, we have to be so solid on that right now, like within a month, we need to know, like, be completely cemented to how we're going ahead. So that's really, really important, and because if we start talking to those, because it's about developing a relationship with them and developing confidence in the project. So we really need to have that at this table and beyond, and also our financial strategy, how we're paying for it, very, very clearly, and when that referendum will be, and how much it will be for, because they'll ask those questions. So that's really, so there's a lot of work to be done in a short period of time, so a little concerned about that. And secondly, and I will have to bring this up because it was brought up to me recently, was with the medical center moving forward. Now, they've come to the municipality, there's land available, so they are implementing right with their campaign. And so I've heard feedback, well, you're gonna ask for a referendum in the fall, we're gonna be at the height of our campaign, we're talking to a lot of the same people. So there is capacity, but, there could be campaign fatigue. So we need to consider that very realistically as well.
And they're moving ahead, I met with them on Tuesday.
Yeah. All systems go on that, so the timing is really freaking me out.
No, it's not particularly good. Okay.
But maybe we can leverage it in one way, though, in showing that there's municipal support for the medical,
Mhm.
If people come and use the right facilities, they won't need the medical bill.
That's right, it's competitive.
But that we're providing land for that, so that
Yes.
they're both,
Doable.
uni
It's not a
initiatives in one
competition,
way.
it's not a competition, it's.
It's
we're-
building
Exactly, you wanna-
communities, like I'm.
You want to show that you're supporting the community in multiple ways.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Whereas
definitely good
before,
option.
Build the
it was
relationship.
completely private, so that,
But it's just if they're going to the community and saying, support us, and we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, there's no
So
question about
people
that.
might feel divided, I don't know, I don't
Depends how
particularly
deep the
think,
pockets are.
It might be a
And
different
they're very,
demographic.
and
too.
yeah, they're.
No, I think it'd be pretty similar
Right.
demographic, yeah. I think there'd be a huge overlap.
Yeah. Well, we're looking at a potential ask list, and I'm sure
Yeah.
they're looking exactly the same ones.
yeah, nothing we can do about it.
So just to be aware of it.
Just as a higher risk factor in terms of
Yeah.
commitment.
Exactly.
Well, it just goes back to being able to approach it strategically too, and about when we do, what our milestones are.
Well, if the physio tells them they need exercise every day, then they need the community center to come and exercise that.
I think that's what Drew was
Health
saying.
and wellness, right, come on down.
Are you happy with 6.2 then?
I think so, I think.
Yeah, I guess
Alright.
we'll just go ahead.
Do we need a resolution to issue the card?
I don't think so.
We were gonna put a deadline of March 30th on it, March
Perfect.
29th.
If you get it out in the next little while, I guess.
I'm just wondering, do we kick the Muni Hall out when we put the medical clinic in?
I already asked them that. They're not interested. They don't have faith that the community center will succeed. Here, they don't want to tie up.
Well, I asked that question too about, just combining with other things, because people were asking me, and all the ones they've looked at are all standalone facilities.
Yeah.
All the other islands are all standalone facilities, they're not combined with anything else.
Yeah.
Other than
I
having-
met with two of the board
Yeah,
members.
I-
Yeah.
coastal health and,
Tim and
Yeah.
Sherry Johnson.
yeah.
Yes, when you said it,
In West Van, they've got coastal
I
health
tried,
and some
I was
offices
just being
in the community
facetious, I
center,
was trying to
but
tie up the agenda.
not any medical clinics. Yeah.
All right, well then, 6.3 is to move to a closed meeting.
That's our cue.
Recommendation to.
That's where it gets awkward for our dinner guests.
Yeah.
Can we stay? I don't know. Can you stay?
How much more number crunching? How much more number crunching?
Want to take a 5-minute break, everybody?
I shifted some part of that.
So
Yeah,
You
Okay,
have
well,
to get.
okay.
2-minute break?
There's only one item.
2-minute break.
That's the agenda.
Why don't you stay with
There's
us?
only one
Not even a
item.
2-minute break?
that would be, I think.
Is that your?
That would be there.
Oh, see, that's really something.
Operation will have to be a negative, the same as I think. Yeah, there's creation, what our current operating costs are. And the other collaborative.
So
I just remember you guys making a comment that was really.
Why
So, yeah, so you sound,
Because
sounds
you were the
very.